They said she was worthless, too weak to lead, too broken to matter. But on the night Alpha King Kael Draven stood before his entire pack and tore apart the sacred mate bond, rejecting Lyra Vale in front of thousands, he made the biggest mistake of his life. Because what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the trembling Omega he threw away carried a bloodline so ancient, so terrifying, that even the oldest wolves had forgotten its name. This is the story of how a rejected mate rose from shame and poverty to burn down an empire. Stay until the end to see her final revenge. Drop a like if you're ready for this journey, and comment what city you're watching from. The rejection square was packed. Lyra had never seen so many wolves in one place. Thousands of them, shoulder to shoulder, filling every corner of the massive stone courtyard at the heart of Blackridge territory. The air buzzed with anticipation, thick and electric, like the moments before a thunderstorm. Banners bearing the Alpha's crest, a silver wolf against black mountains, hung from every stone pillar, snapping in the wind that tore down from the peaks. She stood at the center of it all, small and trembling, her thin dress doing nothing against the cold wind that cut across the mountain valley. The fabric was patched in 3 places, the hem dirty from walking through mud to get here. She tried to clean it, spent an hour scrubbing the worst stains with cold water and lye soap until her knuckles were raw. Tried to look presentable, like someone who might deserve to stand beside a king. But standing here now, surrounded by wolves in fine furs and polished leather, jewels glinting at their throats and wrists, she felt like a stain that wouldn't wash out. "Why are there so many people?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the murmur of the crowd. No one answered. The guards flanking her didn't even look her way. They stood like statues, hands on their sword hilts, eyes fixed straight ahead on some distant point. She might as well have been invisible. Above her, on the raised stone platform reserved for the Alpha's family and the Council of Elders, Kael Draven stood like a monument carved from granite. Tall, easily 6.5 feet, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell just past his collar and eyes the color of steel in winter. Cold. Sharp. Unforgiving. He wore the ceremonial black armor of the king, wolf pelts draped over his shoulders, the fur thick and glossy, silver chains crossing his chest in intricate patterns that caught the light. A crown of iron thorns rested on his head, each point filed to a wicked edge. The armor alone probably cost more than her house, more than her entire district. He looked every bit the legend people said he was. The undefeated warrior who'd killed his first challenger at 16. The king who'd united 3 warring territories under one banner through blood and steel. The Alpha who'd never lost a challenge, never shown mercy, never backed down. And he was looking at her like she was dirt on his boot. Lyra's hands shook. She clenched them into fists, trying to steady herself, digging her nails into her palms until she felt the bite of pain. But it didn't help. Her wolf was silent inside her, coiled tight with dread, whimpering like a beaten dog. She could feel the bond between them, faint, fragile, barely there. A golden thread stretched between her chest and his, so thin it might snap if she breathed too hard. It had snapped into place 3 days ago, when their eyes met across the training grounds. She'd been delivering laundry to the barracks. He'd been overseeing drills. Their eyes had locked for one breathless second, and the world had tilted sideways. A mate bond, fated, sacred, written in the stars and blessed by the moon, unbreakable, or so the stories said. Except Kael hadn't smiled when he felt it. He hadn't come to her, hadn't spoken a word, hadn't acknowledged her existence. He just turned and walked away, his expression unreadable, leaving her standing there with her heart racing and her wolf whimpering in confusion. She'd waited, thought maybe he needed time to process it. Maybe he was consulting with the elders, making arrangements, planning how to announce it properly. She'd been so stupid, and now this. "Silence!" The voice of Elder Torin boomed across the square, and the crowd fell quiet instantly, like someone had thrown a blanket over them. The old wolf stepped forward, his white beard braided with silver rings that clinked softly as he moved. His ceremonial staff, gnarled oak wrapped in leather and carved with ancient runes, tapping against the stone with each step. He was ancient. Some said he'd lived through the territory wars. Others claimed he was over 100 years old, kept alive by old magic and sheer stubbornness. His voice carried the weight of centuries, deep and resonant. "We are gathered here," he intoned, his words echoing off the stone walls, to witness a declaration from Alpha King Kale Draven, ruler of Black Ridge Territory, protector of the northern peaks, guardian of the old laws, and keeper of the sacred bond between pack and land. Lyra's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Her vision swam at the edges. She wanted to run, to bolt for the gates, to disappear into the mountains and never come back, but her legs felt like lead. "This is wrong," her wolf whispered inside her mind, frantic now, clawing at the inside of her skull. "Run. We need to run, now, before it's too late." But where would she go? There were guards at every exit, stationed at 10-foot intervals along the perimeter, wolves on every rooftop, watching with glowing eyes, ready to chase down anyone who tried to flee. The entire pack was here, thousands of them, and she was trapped at the center like an animal in a snare. Elder Torin turned to Kyle, inclining his head with deep respect. "Speak, my king. Let your words be witnessed by the pack and recorded in the chronicles. Let the ancestors hear and bear witness." Kale stepped forward. His boots echoed on the stone platform, each step deliberate, measured, heavy with purpose. When he spoke, his voice carried across the square like thunder rolling down a mountain, deep, commanding, impossible to ignore. 3 days ago, he said, his tone cold and formal, devoid of any emotion, the bond revealed itself. A mate bond between myself and Lyra Vale, daughter of the late Marcus Vale, Omega of the lower district. A murmur rippled through the crowd like wind through tall grass. Lyra heard the whispers starting, some curious, some shocked, some already dripping with contempt. An Omega? With the king? Marcus Vale's daughter? That's the girl who scrubs pots in the kitchens, isn't it? She's so plain. Look at her. That dress. Did she pull it out of the trash? What was the moon thinking? Must be a mistake. Lyra's face burned. She kept her eyes down, staring at the worn stone beneath her feet, at the cracks filled with moss and dirt, wishing the ground would open up and swallow her whole, wishing she could disappear, wishing she'd never been born. Kael's jaw tightened, a muscle ticking beneath the skin. His hands, resting on the stone balustrade in front of him, clenched into fists. "I have considered this bond carefully. I have consulted with the Council of Elders, seeking their wisdom and guidance. I have meditated before the ancestors' stones in the sacred grove and sought counsel from the spirits of the old kings who came before me." Lyra's stomach twisted into knots so tight she thought she might be sick right there on the stones. "No. Please, no, don't do this. I have weighed the needs of the pack against the dictates of fate. I have examined my own heart and my duty to this territory and our people." "No," she whispered, so quietly that only she could hear it, the word barely more than a breath. "And I have reached a decision." Time seemed to slow. The crowd leaned forward as one, eager, hungry, for whatever came next. Lyra could hear her own heartbeat, loud as drums in her ears. Kael's eyes locked onto hers, cold, unfeeling, empty of any warmth or recognition or mercy. "Lyra Vale," he said, his voice ringing out clear and final. "I, Kael Draven, Alpha King of Black Ridge Territory, reject you as my mate." The words hit her like a war hammer to the chest. The bond snapped. She gasped, stumbling backward as pain exploded through her entire body, sharp, searing, like every nerve was being ripped apart at once, like her bones were breaking from the inside out. Her wolf howled in agony, a sound that echoed only inside her skull, raw and primal and broken, the sound of something dying. The crowd erupted. Some gasped in shock, hands flying to their mouths. Others laughed, harsh, cruel sounds that cut through the air like knives. A few even clapped, slow and mocking, as if this were some kind of performance they'd paid to see. Did he really just... He rejected her, in front of everyone. Oh, that's brutal. Poor thing, must be humiliating. Weak bloodline. Of course he did. What did she expect? She actually thought she could be queen? Her? Delusional. Someone should have told her to stay home. Lyra couldn't breathe. She clutched her chest with both hands, trying to hold herself together, but it felt like her ribs were caving in, like her heart was being crushed in a vice. The pain was unbearable, not just physical, but something deeper, something that went all the way down to her soul. Like a piece of her had been torn out, set on fire, and ground into ash. Kale didn't flinch. He stood there, towering and untouchable, his expression carved from stone, as if he just announced a change in patrol schedules or the price of grain. "You are unfit to stand beside me," he continued, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade through flesh. "Your bloodline is weak. Your wolf is barely awakened. I can feel it from here, pathetic and small. You have no rank, no strength, no value to this pack or this throne. Your father left you nothing but debts. You bring nothing to this union except poverty and shame." Each word was a knife, twisting deeper. "To bind myself to you would weaken our people, dilute the royal bloodline, and endanger everything we have built over generations. I will not allow that. A king must be strong. His mate must be stronger. You are neither. You are nothing." The crowd roared with approval now, the sound deafening. Some wolves threw back their heads and howled, long and triumphant. Others stomped their feet against the stone, the sound like drums of war, like thunder, shaking the ground beneath her. Lyra's knees buckled. She hit the stone hard, her palms scraping against the rough surface, skin tearing, blood welling up. The guards didn't move to help her. No one did. She knelt there, bleeding and broken, while the entire pack bore witness to her destruction. Elder Torrens stepped forward again, raising his staff high. His voice boomed across the square. "The rejection has been witnessed by the pack and the ancestors. The bond is severed. Lyra Vale, you are released from any claim to the throne, to the Alpha, and to the privileges and protections of a mated wolf." Released. Like she'd ever had a claim in the first place. Like she'd ever been anything more than a cosmic mistake. The elder continued, his voice formal, ritualistic. "Let it be known that Lyra Vale stands alone, unmarked, unprotected. She is Omega. She is nothing. So let it be written. So let it be witnessed." "So let it be witnessed," the crowd echoed back, the words rolling over her like a wave. Kale turned his back on her. He didn't look at her again. He just walked away, his cape sweeping behind him like a curtain closing on a stage, and the crowd parted like water to let him through. He disappeared into the castle without a backward glance. Lyra stayed on her knees, shaking, as the square slowly emptied. People filed out in groups, still talking, still laughing, voices echoing off the stone. Some threw glances back at her, pitying, mocking, curious, disgusted. But no one stopped. No one offered a hand. No one said a kind word. Within 20 minutes, the square was empty. Just her, alone, bleeding on the cold stone under the indifferent sky. A crow cawed somewhere overhead. The wind picked up, cutting through her thin dress, and Lyra knelt there, broken, and wondered why she was still breathing. The walk back to the lower district felt like it took hours. Lyra kept her head down, her arms wrapped around herself, trying to make herself as small as possible. But it didn't matter. People saw her. They always saw her. Eyes tracked her from windows, from doorways, from the shadows between buildings. That's her. The rejected one. Can you believe she actually thought she had a chance? Omega trashed trying to climb above her station. "My cousin works in the castle. She said the girl fainted during the ceremony. I heard she begged him not to do it. On her knees, pathetic." What did she expect? She's nobody. The whispers followed her through the streets like ghosts, like demons, impossible to escape. She bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood, focusing on the sharp pain to keep from screaming, from breaking down in the middle of the road. The lower district was a maze of narrow alleys and crumbling stone buildings, homes stacked on top of each other like broken teeth, leaning at odd angles, held together by hope and rotting wood. Laundry hung between windows on fraying ropes. Children played in the dirt streets, their clothes patched and too small. The smell of cooking fires and unwashed bodies and open sewers filled the air. This was where Omegas lived, the poor, the forgotten, the ones nobody wanted. Her people. By the time she reached the small, sagging house she shared with her brother, 2 rooms with a leaking roof and walls so thin you could hear the neighbors fighting, her legs were numb. The door hung crooked on its hinges, the wood warped and splintered. She pushed it open and stumbled inside, collapsing against the wall. Lyra? Her brother, Finn, appeared in the doorway of the back room. He was 12, all elbows and knees and sharp angles, with messy brown hair that stuck up in every direction no matter how much she tried to tame it, and wide, worried brown eyes that looked too old for his face. He'd been sick for months, some kind of wasting illness the healers couldn't name or cure. Every week he looked thinner, frailer, like he was slowly disappearing. His cheeks were hollow, his skin pale as parchment, dark circles under his eyes. "What happened?" he asked, his voice small and frightened. "Everyone's talking about what the king did. They're saying in front of everyone, Don't," Lyra said, her voice hoarse and cracked, barely recognizable. "Please, not now." Finn's face crumpled, his eyes filled with tears. He crossed the room in 3 quick steps and wrapped his thin arms around her, holding her tight. He was shaking. She buried her face in his hair. It smelled like soap and wood smoke and the mint leaves she used to mask the smell of sickness, and finally let herself cry. She cried for the bond that had been ripped away, torn out of her chest, like someone had reached in and pulled out her still-beating heart. For the future she'd stupidly, foolishly let herself imagine for 3 brief, idiotic days. A future where she wasn't hungry all the time, where Finn could see a real healer, where she had a place, a purpose, a reason to exist. For the humiliation, the pain, the crushing weight of being told in front of thousands of people that she wasn't enough, that she was nothing, that her very existence was worthless. Finn didn't say anything. He just held her, his small body trembling against hers, and that somehow made it worse, because he was all she had left, and she was failing him. The days that followed blurred together into a waking nightmare. Word of the rejection spread like wildfire through the territory, jumping from district to district, house to house, faster than any messenger could run. Everyone knew. Everyone had an opinion, and no one let her forget it. At the market, vendors refused to serve her. When she approached a stall selling bread, stale loaves she could barely afford, the woman behind the counter looked her up and down with undisguised contempt and said, "We don't serve rejects here. Move along before you drive away my real customers." "I have money," Lyra said quietly, holding out the few copper coins she'd saved. "I don't care if you have gold. Get lost." At the well, where Omegas gathered every morning to draw water and gossip, the conversation stopped dead when she arrived. They'd watch her in silence, arms crossed, faces blank or hostile, until she filled her bucket with shaking hands and left. Then the whispers would start again, loud enough for her to hear. "She's got nerve showing her face. If I were her, I'd have left the territory by now, gone rogue. Anything's better than this. She's probably hoping the king will change his mind. Delusional. Pathetic." Even children pointed and giggled when she walked past. Once, a group of them threw stones at her, small ones that stung when they hit. She kept walking, didn't run, didn't give them the satisfaction. One hit her in the back of the head. She tasted blood. She kept walking. But the worst part, the thing that truly broke her, was the debt collectors. 3 days after the rejection, a wolf in a dark coat appeared at her door just after dawn. Official, cold. He knocked twice, hard and precise, and when Lyra opened the door with her stomach already sinking, already knowing this was bad, he handed her a rolled parchment sealed with red wax bearing the territory's official seal. "Lyra Vale?" "Yes." "Official notice from the treasurer's office. Your father's debts are being called in. Full payment due within 30 days from the date of this notice." Her mouth went dry. Her hand shook as she took the parchment. "What debts? My father's been dead for 2 years. I thought—" "Medical treatment for your brother. Unpaid property taxes going back 18 months. Housing loans your father took out before he died. Food credits from the territorial stores. It's all itemized in the document." He tapped the parchment with one thick finger, his nail dirty. 1,200 silver marks. Total. Due in 30 days. Lyra's blood ran cold. The parchment felt heavy in her hands, like it was made of lead instead of paper. 1,200? I don't have that kind of money. Nobody in this district has that kind of money. Then you'll work it off. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it, just cold amusement, like he was enjoying this. "Labor assignments start tomorrow. Report to the Omega Barracks at dawn. Fail to appear, and the debt defaults to exile. You know what's out there beyond the borders, don't you, girl?" Rogues. Feral wolves who'd lost their humanity. Creatures that hunted anything with a heartbeat. Starvation, cold, death. Exile was a death sentence, just slower and crueler than an execution. He tipped his hat in mock courtesy and walked away, whistling a cheerful tune, Leaving her standing in the doorway with the notice clutched in her shaking hands, Lyra unrolled the parchment with numb fingers. The numbers swam before her eyes, written in neat bureaucratic script that listed every debt, every charge, every coin her father had borrowed to keep them alive. 1,200 silver marks. She made maybe 10 marks a month working odd jobs, scrubbing floors in the kitchens, hauling laundry, mending clothes for people who could afford to pay. At that rate, it would take her— She did the math twice, hoping desperately she was wrong. 10 years. A decade of her life, gone. She'd be nearly 30 by the time she paid it off. Finn would be grown if he survived that long without proper medicine. She crumpled the paper in her fist and sank to the floor, her back against the door, and stared at nothing. The Omega barracks were worse than she'd imagined, and she'd imagined pretty bad. A long, low building on the eastern edge of the territory, right up against the outer wall where the wind howled day and night. It was crammed with Omegas who'd fallen into debt, disgrace, or both. Maybe 200 of them, sleeping on hard bunks stacked 3 high, sharing 2 communal washing rooms and 1 kitchen that served gruel twice a day. The work was brutal. Hauling stone from the quarries, scrubbing floors in the barracks until your knees bled, digging irrigation ditches in frozen ground, repairing roads, carrying supplies up the mountain paths to the guard posts. 16-hour days under the watchful eyes of overseers who seemed to take genuine pleasure in making life miserable. Lyra was assigned to the quarry on her first day. "You!" the overseer barked, a scarred wolf named Garrett with a whip coiled at his belt and eyes like chips of flint. "Vale, grab a pick and get to work. You've got a quota, 50 pounds of stone by sundown. Don't meet it, you don't eat. Simple as that." 50 pounds. Her arms were already aching from carrying water that morning, but she picked up the heavy iron tool, the handle worn smooth by 1,000 hands before hers, and started swinging. The work was agony. Pure, simple, unrelenting agony. Her hands blistered within the first hour, the soft skin tearing, clear fluid weeping from the wounds. Her back screamed by the second hour, muscles she didn't know she had cramping and burning. The sun beat down mercilessly, and there was no shade, no water breaks unless Garrett felt generous, which he didn't. The other workers, mostly Omegas, a few disgraced Betas, kept their distance. No one spoke to her. No one offered advice or help. She was the reject, untouchable. "Move faster, Vale," Garrett shouted, cracking his whip against the ground near her feet, making her jump. "You think you're special just because the king looked at you once? You think you deserve special treatment? You're nothing, just another broke Omega who couldn't hack it. Now dig." Laughter rippled through the other workers. Some bitter, some genuinely amused at her misery. Lyra gritted her teeth and kept digging, kept swinging the pick, kept hauling chunks of stone into the wooden cart beside her. Every muscle screamed, every breath burned. But she didn't stop. By the end of the first day, she could barely stand. Her hands were raw and bleeding, the blisters burst and weeping. Her shoulders felt like they'd been pulled from their sockets. Her back was one solid sheet of pain. When she stumbled home that night, moving like an old woman, Finn took one look at her and burst into tears. "Lyra, your hands! Oh, your hands!" "I'm fine," she lied, wrapping them in strips of old cloth torn from a sheet, trying not to wince. "Just tired. It'll get easier." But it didn't get easier. It got worse. Week after week, the work ground her down. She woke before dawn in the dark, worked until dusk with the sun setting behind the mountains, and came home too exhausted to do anything but collapse on the hard floor. Her body was one continuous bruise. Her hands never healed properly, new blisters forming over old scars, calluses building up in thick layers. Finn tried to help. He cleaned their tiny house, cooked what little food they had, mostly thin soup made from scraps and stale bread. But he was so weak himself that even small tasks left him breathless and shaking, coughing until he doubled over. And every night, Lyra did the math. 10 marks a week, minus fees for housing and administrative costs the territory charged. 7 marks actually going toward the debt. 1,200 marks total. At this rate, it would take even longer than 10 years. She was drowning, sinking, disappearing. But she didn't quit. She couldn't. Finn needed medicine, food, a roof that didn't leak when it rained, which it did, constantly, water dripping through the holes they couldn't afford to fix, pooling on the floor. So she worked. And every night, when she dragged herself home and collapsed on the hard floor beside Finn's cot, listening to his labored breathing, she tried not to think about the bond that had been ripped away. Tried not to think about Kyle cold eyes, his voice declaring her worthless in front of thousands. Tried not to think about the future stretching out ahead of her, endless, bleak, hopeless, and gray. But sometimes, in the dark hours before dawn when sleep wouldn't come and her body screamed with pain, she felt something stirring inside her, something that wasn't her wolf, something older, deeper, stranger. It whispered to her in dreams, a voice like distant thunder, like the rumble of the earth deep underground before a quake, like something ancient waking from a long sleep. You are not weak. You are not broken. You are something they have forgotten, something they will remember, something they will fear. Lyra didn't understand it. The voice felt foreign and familiar at the same time, like it came from somewhere far away and deep within her simultaneously. It spoke in a language she didn't know, but somehow comprehended. Sometimes she saw things when the voice spoke. Flashes of images. A woman with silver hair and eyes like molten gold standing on a battlefield. Wolves bowing. Fire spreading across a valley. A crown that wasn't made of iron. She didn't know what it meant, but she didn't tell anyone. She barely even acknowledged it herself. Because if she admitted she was hearing voices and seeing visions, they'd lock her up or cast her out. And then what would happen to Finn? So she buried it, ignored it, pushed it down, and kept digging. 3 weeks into her labor sentence, everything changed. She was hauling a load of stones up the steep quarry path, her arms shaking with the effort, sweat stinging her eyes despite the cold wind, when she heard shouting from the main road. "Move! Clear the path! Make way for the king!" A convoy of carriages thundered past, black lacquered wood trimmed with gold leaf, the Alpha's colors gleaming in the afternoon sun. Guards on horseback flanked them, at least 20 riders, their armor polished to a mirror shine, swords at their hips. Lyra stumbled to the side of the path, nearly dropping her load as the convoy roared by in a cloud of dust and the thunder of hooves. Through the window of the lead carriage, she caught a glimpse of him. Kyle. He sat inside, deep in conversation with someone she couldn't see clearly. A man in formal council robes, probably discussing territory business. Important things. Things that mattered. Kyle's expression was serious, his jaw set, his dark brows drawn together in concentration. One hand rested on the pommel of the sword at his hip, the ceremonial blade he always wore, the one that had belonged to his father and his father's father, passed down through generations of kings. He didn't look out the window, didn't glance at the workers lining the road, backs bent under their loads. Didn't see her at all. To him, she was invisible, less than nothing, a problem solved and forgotten. Lyra stood there, covered in dust and sweat and rock grit, her hands bleeding through the bandages, her body screaming with pain, and felt something crack inside her chest. Not the bond. That was already gone, severed and burned away 3 weeks ago. No, this was something else, something colder, harder, sharper, like ice forming over a deep lake, like stone hardening in a forge. She set down the stones carefully, her movements deliberate, wiped her filthy, bleeding hands on her even filthier dress, and whispered to herself so quietly that even her wolf couldn't hear, so quietly it was barely more than a breath. One day, you'll regret this. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't a hope or a wish or a prayer. It was a promise, a vow carved into her bones, written in blood. That night, Lyra returned home to find Finn unconscious on the floor. The door was ajar. She'd left it locked that morning. She always locked it, paranoid about thieves even though they had nothing worth stealing. "Finn!" She dropped everything and ran inside, falling to her knees beside him. Her heart slammed against her ribs so hard she thought they might break. His skin was pale, almost gray, clammy and cold to the touch. His breathing was shallow, ragged, barely there, each breath a weak rattle in his chest. His eyes moved beneath his closed lids, rapid and frantic, like he was trapped in a nightmare. "Finn, wake up! Please, please wake up!" She shook him, gently at first, then harder, desperation clawing at her throat. His head lolled to the side. His lips had a blue tinge. Nothing. No response. Terror surged through her like ice water flooding her veins. She ran to the neighbor's house, an old widow named Marta who sometimes watched Finn when Lyra worked late, who'd been kind once before the rejection. She pounded on the door with both fists, not caring if she broke her already damaged hands. "Marta, please, I need help. My brother, he's not breathing right. I need—" The door cracked open just an inch. Marta peered out, her wrinkled face illuminated by the dim glow of a single candle. She took one look at Lyra, at her desperate eyes, her bleeding hands, her ragged appearance, and shook her head slowly. "Can't help you, girl." "What? He's dying. I just need you to watch him while I find a healer." "Healer won't come for free. You know that. Everyone knows that. I'll pay. I'll work it off. I'll do anything." "With what?" Marta's expression was almost pitying, but there was fear there too, fear of association. "You're in debt up to your neck. Everyone in the district knows. No healer's going to waste time on you, and I can't afford to get involved. I have my own problems." "Please. He's just a child." The door slammed shut. The lock clicked with a sound like bones breaking. Lyra stood there for 3 heartbeats, staring at the closed door, before she turned and ran. She ran through the streets, her lungs burning, her legs screaming in protest after 16 hours in the quarry. She found a healer in the upper district, a stern-looking woman with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and sharp, calculating eyes. "Please," Lyra begged, grabbing the woman's sleeve as she was locking up her shop for the night. "My brother is dying. I'll work. I'll do anything. Just please, please help him." The healer looked her up and down slowly, her lip curling with distaste. "You're the rejected one, aren't you? The Omega who thought she could be queen?" Lyra's throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, to lie. But what was the point? "Yes, but my brother has nothing to do with that. He's innocent. He's just sick. Please." "Then no." The healer pulled her arm free, brushing at her sleeve as if Lyra had contaminated it. "I don't treat trash. And I certainly don't work for free or on credit. Get off my property before I call the guards." She turned and walked inside, shutting the heavy wooden door in Lyra's face. The lock turned with a definitive click. Lyra tried 3 more healers that night. The second one laughed in her face. "You have some nerve coming here." The third one didn't even let her finish speaking before slamming the door. The fourth one, a younger man who looked like he might have had some compassion once, sighed and said, "Look, I'm sorry, but I can't. The guild has rules. If I treat someone who can't pay, I lose my license. I have a family to feed. I'm sorry." At least he sounded like he meant it. By the time she got back home, stumbling through the dark streets with tears streaming down her face and her breath coming in broken sobs, Finn was barely breathing. The blue tinge had spread from his lips to his fingernails. Lyra collapsed beside him, taking his small, cold hand in both of hers. "Don't leave me," she whispered, her voice breaking into pieces. "Please, you're all I have. You're the only good thing left in this world. Don't go. Please don't go." His hand was so small in hers, so fragile, like a bird with broken wings. She held it tight and cried until there were no tears left, until she was just making dry, broken sounds, her body shaking. And in the darkness, in the deepest part of her mind where that strange voice lived, it whispered again, louder this time, clearer, angry. "They will all pay. Every single one. For every tear, every humiliation, every cruelty. They will know what they have awakened." Lyra closed her eyes. And for the first time since the voice had started speaking, she didn't push it away. She didn't fight it. She didn't ignore it. She listened. And somewhere deep inside her, in a place she didn't know existed, something ancient and terrible and powerful began to wake. Something that had been sleeping for generations. Something that should have stayed asleep. But hunger and pain and rage had called to it. And it was answering. That's it. Finn survived the night. Barely. When the first gray light of dawn crept through the cracks in the shutters, his fever had broken just enough. His breathing steadied, still weak, still shallow, but steady. The blue tinge faded from his lips. Lyra sat beside his cot until the sun was fully up, watching his chest rise and fall, counting each breath like a prayer to gods she no longer believed in. She hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the healers' faces, heard the doors slamming, felt the weight of Finn's cold hand in hers. But something inside her had changed during those dark hours. She'd spent 3 weeks bowing her head, accepting the abuse, swallowing the shame, taking every insult, every humiliation, every blow without fighting back because she thought if she just endured it, if she just survived it, things might get better. They wouldn't. She saw that now. No one was coming to save her. No one cared if she lived or died. The system was designed to break people like her. And she was done breaking. When she stood, her legs were steady for the first time in weeks. Her hands didn't shake. She looked at Finn one last time, brushed his messy hair back from his forehead with gentle fingers, and whispered, "I'll fix this. I promise. Whatever it takes." Then she walked out the door. The quarry was already buzzing with activity when she arrived. Workers hauled stone, picks rang against rock, overseers shouted orders. The sun climbed higher, turning the pit into an oven even though it was barely past dawn. Garrett spotted her immediately. "Vale, you're late! That's a full day's pay docked. Did you hear me? I said—" Lyra walked straight toward him, her expression blank, her eyes focused and calm. He kept talking. "And you didn't meet quota yesterday, so that's another—" He raised his whip, snapping it in the air for emphasis, the leather cracking like thunder. Lyra reached out and caught it mid-swing, the leather wrapped around her hand, coiling like a snake. It should have burned, should have cut into her already damaged skin. It didn't. She didn't even flinch. Garrett's eyes went wide. His mouth fell open. "What the—" She yanked the whip from his grip in one smooth, effortless motion. She was stronger than she remembered being, and threw it into the dirt at his feet. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, calm, cold as winter stone. "Touch me with that again," she said, looking him directly in the eyes, "and you'll regret it." The entire quarry went silent. Workers stopped mid-swing, picks frozen in the air. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. Garrett stared at her, his face turning red, then purple. Veins bulged in his neck. You can't talk to me like that. I'm an overseer. I'll have you—" "You'll have me what?" Lyra asked, her voice still that same eerie calm. "Exiled? I'm already in debt for 10 years. What else can you possibly do to me?" He took a step back, just one. But everyone saw it. Lyra held his gaze unflinching, and for the first time in weeks, maybe in her entire life, she felt something she'd never felt before. Power. Real power. Not the bond. Not her wolf. Something else entirely. Something that had been sleeping inside her. And now it was awake. Garrett opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. Finally, he turned and stormed off, muttering under his breath about insubordination and reports to the council. But he didn't come back. Lyra picked up her tools and went back to work, swinging the pick with steady, measured strikes. But she could feel the eyes on her, watching, wondering, whispering, afraid. One of the other workers, a beta woman with graying hair, sidled up beside her after a few minutes. "That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen," she whispered. "He's going to make your life hell." Lyra didn't look up from her work. "He already has. What's left?" The woman had no answer to that. And deep inside, that ancient voice purred with satisfaction, like a predator that had tasted blood for the first time in centuries. "Good. Let them wonder. Let them whisper. Let them fear. This is only the beginning. They wanted you weak. They wanted you broken. They have no idea what they've created." Lyra swung the pick again, and a crack appeared in the stone, deeper than it should have been, cleaner than she'd ever managed before. She smiled, just a little, and kept working. The change didn't happen all at once. It started small, subtle. Things Lyra noticed but couldn't quite explain. The blisters on her hands healed overnight. She woke up the morning after confronting Garrett expecting the usual pain, the raw, weeping wounds that made every movement agony. But when she unwrapped the cloth bandages, her palms were smooth. Not healed with scars, just smooth, like the injuries had never existed. She stared at them for a full minute, turning her hands over in the weak morning light filtering through the cracks in the shutters. "That's not normal," she whispered. Her wolf stirred inside her, uneasy. "Something's different. Can you feel it?" She could. a warmth in her chest, right behind her sternum, like a coal that had been buried in ash and was slowly coming back to life. It pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, faint but persistent. Finn coughed from his cot, a wet, rattling sound that shattered her thoughts. She shoved her hands into her pockets and went to check on him. He was awake, which was good. His color was better than it had been in days, less gray, more pink in his cheeks. But he was still so thin, his collarbone jutting out sharply beneath his threadbare shirt, his arms like sticks. "How do you feel?" she asked, pressing her hand to his forehead. "No fever." That was something. "Tired," he said, his voice raspy and weak. "But better, I think. Did you find a healer?" She couldn't tell him the truth. Couldn't tell him that no one would help, that she'd begged and been turned away at every door, that the entire territory had decided they were both disposable. "I took care of it," she said instead, forcing a smile. "You just need to rest. Can you do that for me?" He nodded, trusting her completely, and the weight of that trust nearly crushed her. She left for the quarry before he could ask more questions. The other workers noticed the change in her immediately. When she arrived at the pit just after dawn, there was a different energy in the air. People watched her from the corners of their eyes, conversations stopping mid-sentence when she walked past. Even Garrett kept his distance, barking orders from across the quarry instead of getting in her face like he'd done every day for the past 3 weeks. The beta woman with graying hair, her name was Nora, Lyra had learned, approached her during the midday water break. "You've got everyone spooked," Nora said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. She kept her voice low, conspiratorial. "Word spread about what you did to Garrett. Half the camp thinks you've lost your mind. The other half thinks you've got a death wish." "What do you think?" Lyra asked, gulping down water from the communal bucket. It tasted like metal and dirt, but it was wet, and that was all that mattered. Nora studied her for a long moment, her weathered face creased with thought. "I think you're different than you were a week ago. I can't put my finger on it, but something's changed. You stand different, move different, even your eyes are different." Lyra didn't answer. She couldn't explain it herself. But Nora was right. Something had changed. She was stronger, not just emotionally, physically. The work that had nearly killed her 2 weeks ago, that had left her sobbing in pain every night, now felt manageable. She could lift stones she couldn't have budged before. Her endurance had doubled, maybe tripled. By the end of the day, while other workers collapsed in exhaustion, faces gray with fatigue, she was merely tired. And that warmth in her chest kept growing, spreading through her limbs like slow-burning fire. By the end of the week, people were talking openly. "Did you see her lift that boulder yesterday? That thing weighed 200 pounds easy, maybe more. She's not even breathing hard after a full day. It's not natural. Omegas don't get stronger like that. Maybe she made a deal with something, dark magic. Or maybe she's cursed." Lyra ignored them. She worked, collected her meager pay at the end of each week, and went home to Finn. That was all that mattered. Let them talk, let them whisper. As long as they left her alone, she didn't care. But the whispers followed her everywhere, through the quarry, through the market when she bought food, through the streets of the lower district. 2 weeks after she'd confronted Garrett, the overseer finally made his move. She was hauling a cart of stones up the steep quarry path, her muscles burning pleasantly with the exertion, when he appeared at the top of the ridge. He wasn't alone. 2 guards in territorial armor flanked him, their hands resting on sword hilts. His face was twisted with vindictive satisfaction. "Lyra Vale," he announced loudly, making sure everyone in the quarry could hear. His voice echoed off the stone walls. "You're being charged with insubordination, threatening an overseer, and disrupting the peace. The council has ordered your immediate transfer to the northern work camps." The northern camps. Everyone knew what that meant. They were logging camps deep in the mountains, brutal places where workers died from cold, exhaustion, or attacks by the feral creatures that roamed the wilderness beyond the territory boundaries. Winters there killed half the workforce. It was one step above exile. It was a death sentence for someone like her. The quarry went silent. Workers stopped what they were doing, picks frozen in mid-swing, watching with a mix of pity and morbid curiosity. Some looked relieved it wasn't them. Others looked sympathetic but wouldn't meet her eyes. Lyra set down the cart handles slowly, deliberately. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her expression calm. "On whose authority?" Garrett sneered, pulling a rolled parchment from his coat. "The council. Signed by Elder Torin himself. You don't get to question it. Reject. You're lucky they're not exiling you outright. One of the guards stepped forward, hand moving to his sword hilt. He was young, maybe 20, with nervous eyes. Come quietly, and we won't use force. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Lyra looked at the document Garrett was waving like a victory banner. She couldn't read all of it from this distance, but she could see the seal, red wax stamped with the council's mark. Official, legal, binding. They were going to send her away, to die in the mountains, and Finn would be alone. No healer, no food, no one to protect him. He'd die within a week. No, that couldn't happen. That wouldn't happen. I'm not going, she said quietly. Garrett laughed, a harsh, barking sound that made several workers flinch. You don't have a choice. You're a debtor and a reject. You have no rights. I'm not going, she repeated, louder this time. The warmth in her chest flared suddenly, spreading through her limbs like liquid fire. Her hands tingled, her vision sharpened. The first guard moved toward her, reaching for her arm. Don't make this difficult, girl. Just come with... She caught his wrist without thinking, and twisted. The guard yelped in pain and dropped to one knee, his face going white. She wasn't trying to hurt him, at least she didn't think she was, but her grip was like iron. She could feel the bones in his wrist grinding together under her fingers, could feel how easy it would be to snap them. The second guard drew his sword with a metallic rasp. Release him, now, or I'll run you through. Back off, Lyra said, her voice strange to her own ears, deeper, resonant, carrying an authority she'd never possessed before. It didn't sound like her. It sounded like someone older, stronger. All of you, back off. Something rippled through the air, power, raw and undeniable, like a wave of heat from a forge, washing over everyone in the quarry. The second guard actually took a step back, his sword wavering, his hands were shaking. Around the quarry, workers were backing away too, their eyes wide. A few looked terrified, hands raised as if to ward off evil. Others looked awed, mouths hanging open. Garrett's face had gone from red to purple. Veins bulged in his neck. You can't. How dare you? This is treason. Attacking the king's guards. You'll hang for this. I said no. Lyra released the first guard's wrist, and he scrambled backward, cradling his arm. I'm not leaving my brother alone to die. You want to exile me? Fine, do it officially, but I'm not going to your death camp to make it easy for you. You have no say in this, Garrett shrieked, spittle flying from his mouth. You're nothing, an omega, a reject. You have no power here. Enough. The voice cut through the quarry like a blade through silk. Everyone froze. Lyra turned slowly, her heart suddenly pounding for a different reason. A man stood at the top of the quarry path, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark leather and a long black coat that moved in the wind. Even from this distance, even with the sun in her eyes making it hard to see clearly, she knew who he was. The set of his shoulders, the way he stood, the absolute authority radiating from him. Kael. The Alpha King had come to the quarry. Her heart slammed against her ribs. The warmth in her chest spiked suddenly, hot and sharp, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. The bond was gone. She knew it was gone. She'd felt it snap. But something in her still recognized him, still responded to his presence. He descended the path with measured steps, his boots crunching on gravel. The guards immediately dropped to one knee, heads bowed. Garrett fell to his knees so fast he nearly face-planted in the dirt. My king, Garrett stammered, his voice high and panicked. She attacked my guards. Unprovoked. She's dangerous. We were following council orders to transfer her. Kael held up one hand and Garrett fell silent immediately. The king's eyes swept over the scene methodically, over the kneeling guards, one still cradling his wrist, over Garrett groveling in the dirt, his earlier bravado completely evaporated, over the workers standing frozen like deer caught by a predator, barely daring to breathe, and finally, inevitably, over Lyra. Their gazes locked. For the first time since the rejection, since that horrible day in the square, she looked him directly in the eyes without flinching. Without lowering her gaze in submission like every wolf instinct screamed at her to do. She met his steel-gray stare with her own, chin raised, jaw set. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition. Or something else she couldn't identify. Everyone out, he said, his voice calm but carrying absolute authority. No room for argument. Clear the quarry, now. No one argued. Workers grabbed their tools and fled up the path, some running, others walking as quickly as dignity allowed. The guards hauled Garrett to his feet and dragged him away, the overseer still sputtering protests that died the moment KL looked at him. Within 2 minutes, the quarry was empty, except for Lyra and KL. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. The wind whistled through the stone walls. Somewhere overhead, a bird called. KL spoke first. "You look different." "So do you," Lyra said, though it wasn't true. He looked exactly the same, perfect, untouchable. Like a statue carved from stone in arrogance, every line of him designed to intimidate. His jaw tightened, a muscle ticking beneath the skin. "I've been hearing reports about you. Unusual strength, healing faster than normal, confronting authority, refusing assignment. Is that why you're here, to check on the reject who won't die quietly? Watch your tone." "Or what?" The words came out before she could stop them, fueled by weeks of anger and pain and exhaustion. "You'll reject me again?" "Already did that." "You'll exile me?" "They were trying." "You'll kill me?" Might be a mercy at this point. His eyes flashed, something dark and dangerous moving in their depths. For a moment she thought he might actually strike her. His hand twitched toward his sword, but he didn't move otherwise. "What's happening to you?" he asked instead, his voice lower now, controlled. Almost concerned? No, she was imagining it, projecting what she wished she could hear. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't lie to me." He took a step closer, and she forced herself not to back away. "I can feel it. Power, coming from you. That's not normal for an Omega. That's not normal for anyone." "Maybe I'm not normal." "No," he agreed quietly, his eyes studying her face like he was seeing her for the first time. "You're not." She laughed, bitter and sharp. "Is that why you rejected me? Because I wasn't normal enough? Or was I just too normal? Too common, too poor? You never really explained which particular failing was the worst." "I had my reasons." "Oh, I know your reasons. Weak bloodline, no value, worthless. You were very clear about my many, many shortcomings." She could feel the anger building now, hot and dangerous, mixing with that strange power in her chest until she thought she might explode. "You humiliated me in front of thousands of people. You destroyed any chance I had at a decent life in this territory. And for what? Your pride? Your precious bloodline? Your reputation? It wasn't personal. It was to me." The shout echoed off the quarry walls, and several small rocks tumbled down from the ledges above. Her hands were shaking now, but not with fear. With rage. Pure, undiluted rage. "Do you have any idea what you did? What my life has been like since that day?" He said nothing, just stood there, looking at her with those cold gray eyes. "My brother almost died 3 nights ago because no healer would see him, because I'm the reject, the Omega trash who thought she could stand beside a king. I'm working 16 hours a day to pay off debts that aren't even mine. Debts that mysteriously appeared right after you threw me away. I'm starving. I'm exhausted. I sleep on a floor in a house that's falling apart. And the only reason I haven't laid down and died is because Finn needs me." "I didn't know about your brother," Kael said quietly. "Would it have mattered if you did?" She took a step toward him, and he actually blinked in surprise. "Would you have shown mercy? Would you have cared that rejecting me would destroy not just my life, but his too? Or would you have done it anyway because your bloodline is more important than 2 Omega lives?" He didn't answer for a long moment. Then, "I don't know." At least he was honest. Lyra turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. The anger was draining away now, leaving just exhaustion in its wake. She couldn't look at him anymore. It hurt too much. Like staring at the sun. "Why are you really here?" "There have been incidents in the territory. Omega's going missing, corruption in the work programs, worse than I realized, money disappearing, false charges appearing on debt records. I've been investigating for the past 2 weeks. And your name came up, multiple times. Reports of insubordination, threatening behavior, unusual displays of strength, refusal to follow lawful orders." He paused. "I needed to see for myself what was happening. Well, you've seen. I'm still breathing, still working, still surviving despite your best efforts to crush me. Satisfied? No. She turned back to him, surprised by the flatness in his voice. He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not anger, not pity. Something else. Something that might have been regret if she didn't know better. Something's wrong in this territory, he said. The debt collections are being manipulated. The work assignments are being used to get rid of people who ask questions. The way Omegas are being treated, it's not just harsh, it's systematic. Someone's been gaming the system, and I need to find out who. Welcome to my life for the past month. I'm going to fix it. Sure you are. She didn't bother hiding her skepticism. The mighty king is going to save the poor Omegas. Forgive me if I don't hold my breath waiting for your mercy. His eyes hardened. I mean it. Even if you do fix whatever corruption you've found, it won't change what you did to me. It won't give me back what you took. It won't undo the humiliation or the pain or the way everyone in this territory looks at me like I'm garbage. I know. The admission was so quiet she almost didn't hear it. The words hung in the air between them. Lyra wanted to scream at him, to rage and cry and make him feel even a fraction of the pain he'd caused her. But she was so tired, tired of being angry, tired of hurting, tired of everything. I need to get back to work, she said finally, her voice dull, before Garrett reports me for breathing wrong. Garrett's being reassigned, effective immediately. She blinked, thrown by the sudden shift. What? I don't tolerate abuse of power. Not in my territory. Not from anyone. Cale's voice was firm, carrying the weight of absolute authority. You'll have a new overseer by tomorrow morning, one who understands that workers are people, not animals to be beaten into submission. Thank you? She wasn't sure what else to say. He nodded once, sharp and formal, then turned to leave. Wait, Lyra called out before she could stop herself. He stopped, looking back over his shoulder. The afternoon sun, caught in his dark hair, turned his eyes from gray to silver. Why did you really reject me? She asked. The truth this time. Not the official reasons you gave the council. Why? For a long moment he didn't answer. His jaw worked like he was chewing on words, trying to decide whether to speak them. Then, so quietly she almost didn't hear it over the wind. Because I was afraid. Of what? Of what it would mean. To have you. He met her eyes, and for the first time she saw something raw there, something vulnerable. The bond was strong, stronger than any I'd heard of. I could feel what you felt, your pain, your fear, your hope. It was overwhelming, and I didn't know how to handle it, so I cut it off. You were afraid of feeling too much, Lyra said slowly, trying to understand. So you made sure I felt everything alone. He flinched, actually flinched. I made a mistake, I see that now. Does that change anything? No, he admitted, but I want you to know it anyway. Then he walked away, disappearing up the quarry path and leaving her standing alone in the empty pit with her thoughts spinning. Lyra's legs gave out. She sank to the ground, her back against a boulder, her mind reeling. He was afraid. The mighty Alpha King who'd faced down challengers and united territories and never shown weakness to anyone, he was afraid. Of feeling too much. Of the bond. Of her? That didn't make any sense. Unless... Her hand went to her chest, pressing against the warmth that pulsed there like a second heartbeat. Stronger now than it had been this morning. Growing. What was happening to her? And more importantly, what would happen when whatever this was fully awakened? That night, Lyra dreamed. She stood in a vast dark space. No walls, no ceiling, no floor. Just endless black stretching in every direction like she was suspended in a void. But she wasn't alone. A woman stood before her, maybe 20 feet away. Tall, regal, with silver hair that flowed past her waist like liquid moonlight. Her eyes were gold. Not yellow or amber, but true gold, like molten metal. She wore armor that looked ancient, ornate, covered in symbols and runes Lyra didn't recognize. Power radiated from her in visible waves, distorting the air. Who are you? Lyra asked. Her voice echoed strangely in the emptiness. The woman smiled, sad and knowing and fierce all at once. I am what you will become, what you were always meant to be, what they tried to erase. I don't understand. You will. The woman stepped closer, and with each step, golden light spread from her feet like ripples in water. They tried to bury us. Your line, my daughters and their daughters, and all who came after. They erased the records, burned the histories, killed anyone who remembered the old ways. But blood doesn't forget, child. Power doesn't die. It only sleeps. What power? What are you talking about? Ours. The woman touched Lyra's chest, right over her heart, and the warmth exploded into fire. We were the first, before the packs, before the territories and their kings and their thrones built on violence, before the alphas claimed dominion. We were queens, true queens, and they feared us. Lyra gasped, falling to her knees as images flooded her mind like a dam breaking. Battles. Armies of wolves bowing before a woman with golden eyes. Fire spreading across a valley, controlled and precise. Cities built from stone and magic. A crown that wasn't made of iron but of pure light floating above a woman's head. Screams, blood, betrayal, a massacre in the night, books burning, children hidden, a bloodline scattered and hunted. It's too much. I can't. Stop. You can. You must. The woman knelt beside her, gripping her shoulders. Her hands were warm, solid, real. They will try to stop you. They will fear what you're becoming because they remember what we were, buried deep in their ancestral memories. But you are stronger than all of them. You always have been. I'm just an Omega. You were never just anything. The woman's voice was fierce now, blazing with conviction. The designation means nothing. They created those ranks to control you, to keep you weak, to make you believe you were less. But you are my daughter's daughter's daughter, carried down through centuries in hiding. You are the last of our line, and you will make them remember what they destroyed. I don't want this. Yes, you do. You want power. You want revenge. You want to make them pay for every humiliation, every cruelty, every injustice. The woman's golden eyes burned into hers. Stop lying to yourself. Embrace what you are. The dream shattered like glass. Lyra woke gasping, tangled in her thin blanket, covered in sweat despite the cold night air. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The sun wasn't up yet. The sky outside the window was still dark, stars visible through the cracks in the shutters. Finn was still sleeping on his cot, his breathing steady and peaceful. She pressed her hand to her chest. The warmth was still there, stronger now than before the dream. Pulsing, growing, like something alive inside her, waiting to be born. What had the woman said? You are the last of our line. Lyra got up on shaking legs and walked to the cracked mirror, hanging on the wall by a single rusty nail. In the dim pre-dawn light filtering through the shutters, she looked the same. Thin, tired, dark circles under her eyes, tangled hair. Nothing special. But when she looked closer, leaning in until her nose almost touched the glass, there was something different. Her eyes. For just a moment they gleamed gold, not a trick of the light, not reflection. Gold, like molten metal, like the woman in the dream. Then it faded, and they were just brown again. She stumbled back, her heart racing, and knocked over the water bucket. It clattered against the floor. Finn stirred but didn't wake. Lyra sank down against the wall, hugging her knees to her chest. What was happening to her? The answer came 3 days later, sudden and violent and impossible to ignore. Lyra was working as a quarry. The new overseer Marcus was gruff but fair, a beta who actually treated them like people instead of animals. When she heard shouting from the direction of the lower district, screaming, high and terrified and wrong, she dropped her tools and ran without thinking, her feet pounding against the rocky path. Other workers looked up, confused, but she didn't stop to explain. By the time she reached her street, a crowd had gathered in a semicircle. Smoke poured from one of the houses, the one directly next to hers, Marta's house. Flames licked out of the windows like demon tongues, orange and red and hungry. The wooden shutters were already gone, consumed. People were throwing buckets of water, but the fire was spreading too fast, jumping from beam to beam. Someone's inside, a man shouted, his face black with soot. I heard her screaming. The door's blocked, someone else yelled. We can't get through. Lyra didn't think, didn't plan, didn't hesitate. She just moved. She pushed through the crowd, people shouting at her to stop, to wait, trying to grab her arms, and ran straight for the burning building. "Are you insane?" someone yelled behind her. "You'll die. The whole thing's about to collapse." The heat hit her like a physical wall 10 feet from the door. The doorway was completely engulfed in flames, the wood blackening and cracking, the frame warping. Smoke poured out in thick black clouds that stung her eyes and filled her lungs. She should have stopped, should have turned back, should have waited for help. Instead, she walked into the fire. The flames parted around her. Not because of wind, not because of luck or chance or the way fire naturally moves. They just moved, pulled back like curtains, leaving a path through the inferno. Inside, the smoke was thick and black, choking, burning her throat. She could barely see 3 feet in front of her face. The heat was intense enough to make the air shimmer, but she could hear Marta coughing somewhere in the back room, choking, desperate. Lyra found her huddled in a corner, trapped by a fallen beam that had crushed her leg. The old woman's eyes went wide with absolute terror when she saw Lyra emerge from the flames. "Stay back. You'll burn. The whole house is coming down." Lyra grabbed the beam without thinking. It was on fire, burning hot enough to melt metal, flames crawling across its surface. It should have seared the flesh from her bones. It didn't. She lifted it with one hand. It weighed at least 300 pounds, and threw it aside like it was made of straw. Marta stared at her in absolute shock, mouth hanging open. Lyra pulled her to her feet. "Can you walk?" Yes, but how? Your hands. You should be..." "Later. Move. Now." She half carried, half dragged Marta through the burning house, flames parting before them like they were afraid. The ceiling groaned, ready to collapse. Sparks rained down. They burst out into the street. The crowd erupted in shocked exclamations as they emerged from the flames, both of them singed and covered in soot, but alive. Impossibly alive. Lyra set Marta down gently and stepped back. And that's when she saw her hands. They were glowing. Faint golden light pulsed beneath her skin like veins of molten metal running through her flesh. As she watched, frozen, the light slowly faded, sinking back beneath the surface until her hands looked normal again. The crowd had gone absolutely silent. Everyone was staring at her, not with gratitude for saving Marta's life, not with relief that she was alive, with fear, pure, primal, instinctive fear. "She walked through fire," someone whispered, and the whisper spread like the flames had. "The flames moved for her. I saw it. They pulled back. She lifted that beam like it weighed nothing. That's not natural. She's cursed. She's possessed. Witch. Demon. She brought the fire. I bet she started it." Lyra looked around at the faces surrounding her in a tightening circle, saw the fear, the suspicion, the hatred already forming, the rejection all over again, but worse this time because now they were afraid of her. Marcus, the new overseer, pushed through the crowd. He was a big man, scarred from years of hard work, but his eyes were kind. He took one look at her still smoking hands, at the way the crowd was backing away like she carried plague, and his expression hardened with understanding. "Get back to the quarry," he said quietly, urgently. "Now, before this gets worse. I just saved her life. I know. I saw. And they're going to kill you for it if you don't leave right now. Go. I'll handle this." Lyra looked at Marta, expecting, what? Gratitude? Defense? Some acknowledgement that she'd just risked her life? The old woman wouldn't meet her eyes, just stared at the ground, trembling. No one would look at her. She turned and ran, the crowd parting to let her through, people pressing back against walls to avoid touching her. Behind her, the whispers grew into shouts. "Witch! Demon! She brought the fire. This is her doing. She's dangerous. The council needs to know. Burn her before she curses us all." Lyra didn't stop running until she reached the quarry, her lungs burning, her legs shaking. The golden glow was completely gone from her hands now, but she could still feel the power thrumming beneath her skin like electricity. What was she? What was she becoming? That night, as she sat in her dark house with Finn sleeping beside her, exhausted from another day of fighting his illness, she heard the voice again, clearer than ever before. "Now they see. Now they fear. Good." "Who are you?" Lyra whispered into the darkness, too tired to fight it anymore. "I am you. The part they tried to erase. The power they tried to bury. the fire they couldn't extinguish. I don't want this. I just want Finn to be safe. I just want to survive. Liar. The voice was almost amused. You've wanted power your whole life, power to protect what's yours, power to survive, power to make them pay for every insult, every humiliation, every cruelty. Stop pretending you don't want revenge. I just want to be left alone. Then claim what's yours, and they'll have no choice but to leave you alone. Stop hiding. Stop cowering. You are fire and gold and ancient fury. You are the last queen of a forgotten line. You are... A knock at the door cut off the voice. 3 sharp raps, urgent and commanding. Lyra froze, her heart jumping into her throat. It was past midnight. The moon wasn't even up yet. No one knocked at this hour unless something was very, very wrong. Another knock, more insistent. She stood slowly, every muscle tense, and walked to the door. Put her hand on the rough wood. Who is it? Open the door, Lyra. Kale's voice, low and urgent. Now, we don't have much time. She opened it a crack, peering out. Kyle stood there alone, without guards or ceremony or the trappings of kingship. He wore plain, dark clothes, a cloak with the hood down. He looked tired, worried. His eyes scanned the street behind him like he expected an attack. We need to talk, he said without preamble. Right now, it's not safe for you here anymore. What are you talking about? The council knows what you did today. Saving that woman, walking through fire. The whole lower district saw it, and word travels fast. His eyes were serious, urgent. They're calling an emergency session at dawn. They're going to declare you a threat to the territory. Her blood ran cold. A threat? They want to exile you. Some of them want worse. Public execution to prove you're not invincible. To stamp out whatever you are before it spreads. His voice dropped even lower. Lyra, I can't stop them alone. Not without proof of what's really happening in this territory, of the corruption I've been investigating. But I need your help to find it. My help? She almost laughed. Why would I help you? Because whatever you are, whatever's happening to you, it's connected to everything else. The corruption. The missing omegas. The manipulation of the debt records. All of it. He stepped closer, his voice intense. Someone is very afraid of what you might become. Afraid enough to try to bury you in debt and work you to death before you figure out what you are. Don't you want to know why? She did. That was the problem. She desperately wanted to know. Trust me, Kyle said quietly. One more time. Help me find the truth, and I'll protect you and your brother. I swear it on my title. Lyra looked at him. The man who'd destroyed her life with a few cold words. Who'd thrown her away like garbage in front of thousands of witnesses. Who was now asking her to trust him. She should say no. Should slam the door in his face. Should tell him to go to hell. But behind him, in the distance, she could see torches. Hear voices growing louder. The mob was forming, working up their courage, and she was out of options. Fine, she said, opening the door wider. But if you betray me again, if this is some trick, I will burn your entire kingdom to the ground. Do you understand me? His eyes widened slightly at the threat. Then, to her complete surprise, he smiled. Just a little, just a ghost of expression. Deal. I believe you would. The torches were getting closer now. She could hear shouting, her name being called, not in greeting, but in accusation. Kale glanced back, then looked at her urgently. We need to go, now. Is there anyone else in the house? Lyra looked at Finn, still sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger. I'm not leaving him. Then bring him, quickly. She hesitated only a moment. Then she scooped Finn into her arms. He barely stirred, just made a small sound and nestled against her shoulder, and followed Kyle out into the night. Behind them, the mob reached her house. She heard the door crash open, heard angry voices demanding to know where she'd gone. Ahead of them, the darkness waited. Kyle led her through back alleys and side streets she didn't know existed, moving with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of his territory. And inside Lyra, deep in her chest, the fire burned brighter than ever before. Hungry. Waiting. Ready. They ran through the darkness until Lyra's lungs burned and her arms ached from carrying Finn. Kyle led them through narrow alleys she'd never seen before, places where the buildings leaned so close together the moonlight couldn't reach the ground. The air smelled like rot and old smoke and things best left undisturbed. How much farther? She gasped, her breath coming in ragged bursts. Almost there, keep moving. Behind them, the sounds of the mob were fading, but not gone. She could still hear them, torches crackling, voices shouting her name with promises of violence, boots pounding against cobblestones. They were hunting her like an animal. Finn stirred in her arms, his eyes opening halfway. Lyra? Where are we going? Why are we running? Somewhere safe, she lied, trying to keep her voice steady even though her heart was hammering. Go back to sleep. He didn't argue, just tucked his head against her shoulder and went limp again. He weighed almost nothing. When had he gotten so light? When had she stopped noticing how sick he really was? That trust he had in her, complete, unquestioning, felt like a knife between her ribs. Cale stopped at what looked like a dead end, a stone wall covered in ivy and moss, older than the buildings around it. He pressed his hand against a specific brick near the bottom, his fingers moving with practiced certainty. Something clicked deep inside the wall. A section of stone swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing a narrow passage that disappeared into darkness. In, quickly. Lyra hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her not to follow him into a dark tunnel where anything could be waiting. But the mob was getting closer again, their voices carrying on the night wind, and she was out of options. She ducked through the opening. The passage was barely wide enough for one person. The walls pressed in on both sides, rough stone that caught on her clothes. Cale came through behind her and pushed the wall closed with a deep grinding sound. Darkness swallowed them whole, absolute and suffocating. Don't move, he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. Let your eyes adjust. There's a drop ahead if you take the wrong step. They stood in silence. Lyra could hear Finn's soft breathing, could feel Kael's presence close enough that she could smell leather and pine and something else. Something that made her wolf whimper and pace despite the severed bond. Some part of her still recognized him as mate, even though the connection was gone. Slowly, very slowly, shapes emerged from the darkness. The passage stretched ahead of them, sloping downward into the earth at a steep angle. This way, Kael said quietly. Watch your step. The floor's uneven and there's water in places. Stay close. They descended into the earth. The air grew colder with every step, damper, until Lyra could see her breath misting in front of her face. Water dripped somewhere in the distance with a steady rhythm that echoed off unseen walls. The passage twisted and turned, branching off in directions she couldn't track. Without Kael, she'd be hopelessly lost down here. After what felt like forever, her arms screaming from carrying Finn, her legs shaking with exhaustion, pale light appeared ahead. Not sunlight, but the cold blue-green glow of luminescent moss growing on the walls in thick patches. The passage opened into a chamber carved from solid rock. It was large, maybe 30 feet across, with a high ceiling that disappeared into shadow above them. Ancient symbols covered the walls, intricate patterns that seemed to move in the flickering light. The same symbols Lyra had seen in her dream, carved into the armor of the woman with golden eyes. What is this place? She whispered. Her voice echoed strangely, like the chamber was larger than it appeared. The old catacombs. They run beneath the entire territory, hundreds of miles of tunnels that predate the current city by centuries. Kael lit a torch from a bracket on the wall, and warm orange light flooded the space, pushing back the shadows. Almost no one knows about them anymore. The entrances were sealed generations ago. We'll be safe here while I figure out our next move. Lyra set Finn down gently on a stone bench carved into the wall. He curled up immediately, still sleeping or pretending to sleep, his breathing steady. She brushed his hair back from his forehead, still no fever, thank whatever was listening, and turned to face Kael. Her hands were shaking, from exhaustion or fear or rage, she couldn't tell. Start talking, she said. You said I'm connected to the corruption in the territory. How? Why? What aren't you telling me? Kael pulled off his cloak and draped it over Finn like a blanket, tucking it around the boy's thin shoulders. The gesture was unexpectedly gentle, careful, like he actually gave a damn about her brother's comfort. What do you know about your mother's family? He asked, not looking at her. Nothing. She died when I was born. Childbirth complications. My father never talked about her, said it hurt too much to remember. That's because he didn't know who she really was. He couldn't have known. Kael moved to the wall, running his fingers over the ancient symbols carved there. The torchlight cast his shadow huge against the stone. These marks, do you recognize them? Lyra stepped closer, studying the patterns. Now that she looked at them properly, something stirred in her memory. Not her memory exactly, something older, deeper, like ancestral knowledge buried in her blood. I've seen them. In dreams. On armor. They're the mark of the first queens. The original rulers of these lands, before the packs were formed, before the alphas claimed dominance through violence and numbers. He turned to face her, his expression serious in the torchlight. Your mother was descended from that line. The council discovered it 2 weeks before our bond appeared. The air left Lyra's lungs in a rush. The chamber seemed to tilt sideways. What? They did a bloodline check on you, standard procedure for anyone connected to the throne through a mate bond. They need to verify lineage, check for genetic incompatibilities, that sort of thing. What they found... He paused, choosing his words carefully. They found markers in the old records, fragments that survived the purges centuries ago. Your mother's family went into hiding after the massacres, changed their names, scattered across different territories to avoid detection. But the blood doesn't lie. The markers were there. You're saying I'm descended from ancient royalty? She couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. It sounded insane, even saying it out loud. That's impossible. I'm an Omega. I work in quarries. I live in a house that's literally falling apart. I'm nobody. The designation means nothing. Omega, Beta, Alpha, they're social constructs, not biological truths. Kale's voice was firm, intense. The rankings were created by the Alpha Coalition after they overthrew the Queens. A way to control the population, to make sure no one ever accumulated enough power to challenge them again. But underneath all that artificial hierarchy, the blood remembers what it was. The woman in my dreams, Lyra said slowly, pieces clicking together in her mind. Silver hair, golden eyes. She said they tried to erase us, that they hunted us down. They did. The first queens ruled for thousands of years with power beyond anything we know today. They could manipulate the elements, fire, water, earth, air. They could heal mortal wounds with a touch. Some could see the future. They commanded absolute loyalty from their people, not through fear but through genuine devotion. They were beloved and feared in equal measure. Kale pulled out a small leather-bound book from inside his coat and flipped it open to a marked page. Until the Alpha Lords formed a coalition, they'd been growing restless under the Queen's rule, wanted more power, more territory, more control. So they orchestrated a betrayal that took decades to execute. They hunted down every queen they could find and executed them publicly. Burned their libraries and temples, destroyed every record of their achievements, scattered their bloodlines across the territories and forbade anyone from speaking their names on pain of death. It was the greatest genocide in our history, and it's been hidden for so long that most wolves think the first queens were just legends, fairy tales to scare children. Lyra sank onto the stone bench beside Finn, her legs giving out. Her mind was reeling, trying to process everything. Why are you telling me this? Why now? Because when the bond appeared between us, the council panicked. Kyle closed the book and set it aside. They saw it as a threat, the return of the Queen's bloodline to power through a connection to the throne, Elder Torin especially. He's older than anyone knows, Lyra. He was there during the final purges. He helped organize them, and when he realized what you were, what you could become. So you rejected me to keep the peace. The words tasted bitter. I rejected you because I was a coward. His voice was raw, stripped of all pretense. I let them convince me that your blood was dangerous, that you were dangerous, that bonding with you would trigger a civil war between those who remember the old ways and those who benefit from the current power structure. Torin painted such a vivid picture of territories burning, of wolves tearing each other apart in ideological warfare. And I believed him because it was easier than fighting the entire council, easier than standing up for what was right. And now? Lyra's hands clenched into fists. What changed? Why do you suddenly care about the truth? Now I've spent 2 weeks investigating the corruption in this territory, following threads that didn't make sense, and I've learned what Torin has really been doing. He crossed to a pack sitting in the corner that Lyra hadn't noticed before and pulled out a leather-bound journal, its cover worn and stained. Elder Torin has been systematically identifying and eliminating anyone with even traces of the old bloodlines. The missing Omegas everyone whispers about? I found the records. They all had markers. Distant relations, diluted blood, but enough to be considered a threat. The debt manipulations that trap people in impossible situations? Designed specifically to work certain people to death before their latent power has a chance to awaken. He opened the journal and held it out to her. You were supposed to die in that quarry, Lyra. The debt that appeared on your record 3 days after the rejection? Fabricated. Every copper mark of it was false, designed to put you in a position where you'd work yourself to death within a year. But you didn't die. You got stronger instead, and that terrified them. Lyra took the journal with shaking hands. The pages were filled with names, hundreds of them, written in neat handwriting next to dates and locations. Some had notes beside them. Eliminated naturally. Work accident. Illness. Disappeared beyond the border. So many names. Her stomach turned. I found 3 more journals like this in Torin's private study, Kyle said quietly, going back 50 years. He's been doing this for half a century, maybe longer, quietly removing anyone who might carry the old blood, making it look like accidents or natural causes. No one questions when an Omega dies in a work accident. No one investigates when someone in debt disappears. How many? Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. At least 600 that I could verify. Probably more. The earlier records are incomplete. 600 people. 600 lives snuffed out because of what they might become. Because of blood they didn't even know they carried. She looked at Finn, sleeping peacefully under Kael's cloak, and felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. The power is waking up, she said. I can feel it, growing stronger every day. Yesterday I walked through fire and it didn't burn me. I lifted a burning beam that weighed 300 pounds with one hand. My wounds heal overnight. I'm faster, stronger. Sometimes I see things with golden light, like the world is different than it appears. I know. I can sense it when I'm near you. It's like standing next to a forge. There's heat coming off you that has nothing to do with temperature. Kael sat down across from her, his elbows on his knees. Torin can sense it too. That's why the council is moving against you so quickly. They're terrified of what you might become if you fully awaken. What will I become? I don't know. The records were destroyed too thoroughly, but if even half the legends are true... He looked at her, and there was something like awe in his eyes. You could be more powerful than any alpha alive. You could reshape the entire territory with a thought. The queens didn't rule through brute strength. They ruled through power that made strength irrelevant. The word should have filled her with hope or excitement. Instead, they terrified her. I don't want power. I never wanted any of this. I just want Finn to be safe. I want to live without being hunted. I want a normal life. Normal isn't an option anymore. Not for you. His voice was gentle but firm. But we can still save Finn. We can still stop Torin before he kills anyone else. And maybe, if we're lucky, we can change things so that no one else has to go through what you've endured. How? We need proof that he's been murdering innocents and manipulating the territory for his own gain. Real proof that even the council can't ignore or dismiss. And to get that, I need to access his private archives. You mean the journals you already found? Those were in his study, where he was careless enough to leave them accessible. But the real evidence, the names, the orders, the detailed records of how each elimination was carried out, that's kept in a locked archive beneath the council chambers. I've known about it for years, but never had reason to access it. Now I do. Lyra saw where this was going. You need me to help you break in. Yes. I can't do it alone. The moment I move against Torin without ironclad evidence, he'll claim I'm unstable or power mad, and the council will remove me. Half of them are terrified of him anyway, but with proof, with undeniable documentation of his crimes. Kael's jaw set with determination. We can end this. Expose him. Save the others he's targeting. Maybe even start to undo some of the damage. You want me to break into the most secure building in the territory to steal documents from a man who's been hunting my bloodline for half a century? Documents that will probably get us both executed if we're caught. Yes. You're insane. Probably. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. But it's the only way forward. We can't run forever. Torin has too much reach, too many resources. He'll find us eventually, and when he does, he'll kill Finn to hurt you, then kill you to eliminate the threat, unless we stop him first." She looked at Finn again, at his too thin frame, his pale face. Thought about the mob that had chased them through the streets with torches and hatred. Thought about the healers who'd turned them away, the workers who whispered, the entire system designed to crush people like her before they ever had a chance to rise. "When?" she asked quietly. "Tomorrow night, during the council feast. It's a formal dinner that happens once a month. Every council member attends, along with most of the administrative staff. The building will be mostly empty except for minimal security. It's our best chance. And if we get caught, then we die together." His voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. "But at least we die fighting instead of running. At least we die trying to do something right." Lyra closed her eyes. The warmth in her chest pulsed, steady and insistent like a second heartbeat. That voice whispered in the back of her mind, clearer now than it had ever been. "Yes, make them pay. Make them all pay for what they've done. Burn it down." "Fine," she said, opening her eyes. "But I'm doing this for Finn, not for you, not for justice or revenge or any noble reason, just for him. So he can have a chance at a life that doesn't involve watching his sister work to death." "I understand." "Do you? Because once we start this, there's no going back. We'll be traitors, enemies of the territory. They'll hunt us until we're dead or we succeed." "I know." Kale leaned forward, his expression intense. "I've been king for 5 years. I thought I was doing good, keeping the peace, maintaining order, making sure the territory prospered. But I was blind. I let corrupt men whisper in my ear, and I believed them because questioning meant work, meant conflict, meant admitting I might be wrong. I rejected you because it was easier than fighting for you. I'm done taking the easy path." Pretty words. I mean them. Every one. He held her gaze. "I can't undo what I did to you in that square. I can't give you back what I took. But I can try to make sure no one else suffers the way you have. And I can swear to you, on my title and my life, that I will protect Finn no matter what happens to us." The sincerity in his voice was hard to deny. She wanted to hate him, wanted to hold on to her anger like a shield. But sitting here in this ancient chamber, looking at the man who destroyed her life and was now asking her to trust him again, "Tell me the plan," she said. They spent the next several hours going over every detail. The layout of the council building, Kael drew it out on the stone floor with a piece of charcoal, marking guard positions and patrol routes. The archive location, 3 levels below ground, accessible through Torrin's private office. How to bypass the locks. Kael had stolen a key during his investigation, but there were backup magical wards that would need to be disabled. The timing, they'd have a 2-hour window during the feast when security would be lightest. It was risky, bordering on suicidal, but it might work. Might. When Finn woke up a few hours later, groggy and confused, Lyra held him and lied through her teeth about where they were and why they were hiding in an ancient catacomb instead of their falling-apart house. "Are we in trouble?" Finn asked, his voice small and frightened. "When aren't we in trouble?" Lyra tried to smile, but it felt wrong on her face, like wearing someone else's expression. "I heard people shouting last night. They were saying bad things about you, calling you names. People say a lot of things. Doesn't make them true." He looked at her with those 2 old eyes, the eyes of a child who'd seen too much suffering. "You're different. Since the rejection. Stronger. I can feel it when you hold me. Like there's heat coming off you that wasn't there before." "I'm still me. I know, but you're more too." He leaned against her shoulder, fitting into the space he'd occupied for years. "Whatever happens, I'm not scared. Not when I'm with you." The absolute trust in his voice nearly broke her into pieces. Kael had the decency to look away, giving them privacy in this moment. They rested through the day, taking turns sleeping while the other kept watch. Kael produced dried meat and hard bread from his pack. Not much, but more food than Lyra had seen in one place in months. Finn ate slowly, carefully, like his stomach had forgotten how to handle proper nutrition. As the sun set above ground, they couldn't see it, but Kael had a way of tracking time even down here. They prepared to move. "Finn stays here," Kael said firmly. "Hidden in the deepest chamber. I've left supplies, enough for 3 days if something goes wrong. Water, food, blankets. The tunnel that leads there is marked. He knelt down to Finn's level. Can you be brave for your sister? Finn nodded, his jaw set with determination that looked heartbreaking on his young face. I can be brave. Good man. Kale pressed something into Finn's hand, a small knife in a leather sheath. Just in case, but you won't need it. No one knows about this place. They left him in a small chamber deep in the catacombs, surrounded by supplies and wrapped in warm cloaks. Lyra held him for a long moment, memorizing the feel of his thin arms around her neck. I'll come back, she whispered. I promise. I know you will. You always do. Walking away from him was one of the hardest things she'd ever done. The council building loomed above them as they emerged from a different catacomb entrance, all stone and iron and centuries of accumulated power. Lights blazed from the feast hall windows on the second floor. Music drifted on the evening air, string instruments and laughter, the sounds of people who'd never known hunger or fear or desperation. Ready? Kale whispered. They stood in the shadows of an alley across the street, watching the building. No, not even close. Yes. They entered through a service entrance Kale had used as a child, before he was king, when he'd sneak in to steal pastries from the kitchens. The hallways were mostly empty, just servants rushing back and forth with platters of food and pitchers of wine for the feast. No one paid attention to two figures in dark cloaks moving with purpose. They climbed 3 flights of stairs, taking routes that avoided the main corridors. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs. Every shadow looked like a guard. Every sound made her flinch. They reached the corridor leading to Elder Torrin's office. 2 guards stood at the door, alert but bored. They'd been standing there for hours already, judging by the way they shifted their weight. Now what? Lyra whispered. Now I use my authority. Kale threw back his hood and walked straight toward the guards, with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in his life. They snapped to attention immediately, hands moving to their sword hilts. My king, we weren't expecting. Your presence isn't on the schedule. I need access to the archive. Official business that can't wait. His tone left no room for argument. The guards exchanged nervous glances. One was young, maybe 19, with acne scars on his cheeks. The other was older, graying at the temples. My king, with respect, Elder Torrin left explicit orders that no one was to access his office during the feast. He was very clear about, I'm the king. Kale's voice dropped to something cold and dangerous, the voice of a man who'd killed challengers and united territories through blood. Are you refusing a direct order from your king? The guards went pale. The younger one fumbled for his keys with shaking hands. No, sir. Of course not, sir. We would never, it's just, the elder said, open, the door. The lock clicked. The door swung inward. Inside Elder Torrin's office was exactly what Lyra expected from a man who'd been accumulating power for decades. Rich tapestries covered the walls, scenes of ancient battles where wolves in armor tore each other apart. Expensive furniture polished to a mirror shine. Shelves lined with books and artifacts that probably cost more than her entire district. A massive desk dominated the center of the room, its surface covered in papers sealed with wax, official documents, ledgers bound in leather. This was where decisions were made that affected thousands of lives, where Torrin had sat for decades, quietly orchestrating murder. Kyle moved immediately to a bookshelf on the far wall. He pulled out 3 specific volumes in sequence, a green tome, a red one, a black one. The entire shelf shuddered and swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing a descending staircase that disappeared into darkness below. How did you know about this? Lyra asked. I've been investigating for 2 weeks. When you're king, people talk. Servants see things. I pieced it together from rumors and old architectural plans. He lit a torch from the brazier in the corner. Come on. We don't have much time. The stairs descended steeply into bedrock. The air grew cold and stale. At the bottom, an iron door blocked their path, sealed with a lock that glowed faintly with magical runes. Kale pulled out the key he'd stolen and inserted it into the lock. The runes flared bright blue, resisting. He muttered something under his breath, words in a language Lyra didn't recognize, and the light faded. The lock clicked open. The archive was exactly what nightmares were made of. A vault carved from solid bedrock, maybe 40 feet on each side. Shelves lined every wall from floor to ceiling, stuffed with documents, ledgers, leather-bound journals, and scrolls that looked ancient enough to crumble at a touch. The air smelled like old paper and secrets and death. "What are we looking for exactly?" Lyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Something about this place demanded silence. Anything with names and dates, records of the missing Omegas, proof of the bloodline purges and how they were carried out. Evidence of the debt manipulations. Kale moved to the nearest shelf and started pulling documents with practiced efficiency. "We need enough to bury him, enough that even his allies on the council can't protect him." They worked in frantic silence, pulling papers, scanning them by torchlight, discarding what was useless. Lyra's hands shook as she read report after report, debt manipulations with official council seals, work assignments specifically designed to kill, lists upon lists of names with eliminated stamped beside them in red ink that looked disturbingly like dried blood. So many names. People she'd never known. People who died alone and forgotten because of what they might have been. "I found it," Kyle said suddenly, his voice tight with triumph and horror. He held up a thick leather journal, its cover embossed with Torrin's personal seal. His personal records. Everything's here, the murders, the manipulation, the systematic plan to eradicate the old bloodlines completely. Names, dates, methods. This is enough to convict him 10 times over. "Then let's go," Lyra said urgently. The warmth in her chest was growing uncomfortably hot, like her body was warning her of danger. "Something feels wrong. We need to—" The door at the top of the stairs slammed open with a sound like thunder. "Enough to convict me of what exactly?" Elder Torrin stood silhouetted in the doorway, his ancient frame backlit by torches from the corridor beyond. He wasn't alone. At least a dozen guards flanked him, swords drawn, faces grim. Lyra's blood turned to ice. They'd been betrayed, or expected, or both. "Going through my private archives, Your Majesty." Torrin descended the stairs slowly, his gnarled staff tapping against stone with each step. His face was twisted with fury and something else, satisfaction, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "How profoundly disappointing. I thought you had more honor than this. More respect for the laws and traditions that keep this territory stable." Kale moved in front of Lyra instinctively, his hand going to his sword. "It's over, Torrin. I have proof of what you've done. The council will see this. They'll know you've been murdering innocents for decades. The council will do nothing." Torrin's laugh was dry as old bones. "Do you think you're the first idealistic young king who thought he could challenge me? Who thought he could change the system from within? I've outlived 6 of your predecessors, boy. I've shaped this territory for over a century, through wars and plagues and famines. I've made the hard decisions that kept us strong while other territories fell to chaos. And I won't let some naive child and a mongrel Omega with delusions of grandeur destroy everything I've built." "You're a murderer," Kale said flatly. "I'm a survivor." Torrin's ancient eyes glittered in the torchlight like chips of ice. "The first queens nearly destroyed us with their power. They would have enslaved every wolf under their rule, made us servants to their whims, broken our spirits until we were nothing but tools for their amusement. The Alphas freed us from that tyranny. And I've spent my entire life making sure that tyranny never returns. Every Omega I eliminated, every bloodline I ended, it was necessary. It was survival. By murdering innocent people?" Lyra's voice cut through the tension like a blade. She stepped out from behind Kale, her hands clenched into fists. By working children to death in quarries? By manipulating debts to trap people in impossible situations? By deciding who lives and who dies based on blood they can't control? By protecting our way of life from the return of monsters? Torrin looked at her with undisguised hatred, his lip curling with disgust. "You're an abomination, a remnant of a dead era that should have stayed dead. You should have died in that quarry like you were supposed to, quietly, painlessly, just another Omega who couldn't handle the work." The warmth in Lyra's chest flared suddenly, hot and sharp. Her skin tingled. "You sent me there. You manipulated my debt. You tried to kill me." "Of course I did." He said it like it was obvious, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "The moment the bond appeared between you and the king, I knew what you were. I could smell the old blood on you, like rot beneath cheap perfume. I tried to handle it quietly, work you to death, make it look natural, avoid drawing attention. No one questions when a debtor dies. But you wouldn't cooperate. You got stronger instead of weaker. Your powers started awakening despite my best efforts. His expression twisted with disgust. So now I'll have to do this the hard way. He nodded to the guards clustered behind him on the stairs. Kill them both. Make it look like the king died protecting the territory from a dangerous criminal who'd infiltrated the council building. No one will question it, and make sure you burn the body. We can't risk her bloodline continuing. The guards drew their swords with a whisper of steel on leather. Kale pulled his own blade, the ceremonial sword he always wore. Stand behind me, Lyra. No. She stepped forward instead of back, the warmth in her chest spreading through her entire body now, filling every limb with heat that had nothing to do with temperature. Her skin tingled, her vision sharpened until she could see every detail. The nervous twitch in one guard's eye, the way another gripped his sword too tightly, the fear they were trying to hide. I'm done hiding behind other people. I'm done being protected like I'm helpless. Girl, you have no idea what you're... She didn't let him finish. The power exploded out of her like a dam breaking. Golden light erupted from her skin, blazing so bright that the guards cried out and shielded their eyes. The air crackled with energy that made her hair stand on end. Papers flew from the shelves, swirling in a vortex around her like a tornado. The torches flared so bright they nearly went out. Lyra felt the change happening inside her. Her wolf surged forward, but it wasn't just her wolf anymore. It was something older, stronger, merged with the power of her ancestors until the two were inseparable. Her body burned and reshaped itself from the inside out. Bones realigned, muscles strengthened. Something fundamental shifted in her very nature. When she opened her eyes, the world looked different, sharper, clearer. She could see threads of energy connecting every living thing in the room, glowing lines of power that pulsed with life. And when she spoke, her voice resonated with power that made the stone walls tremble and dust rain from the ceiling. You should have let me die quietly. The first guard rushed at her, young, stupid, brave. She caught his sword with her bare hand. The blade should have cut through flesh and bone like paper. Instead, it stopped dead, like it had hit solid steel. She twisted the weapon from his grip and threw him into the wall hard enough that he hit with a sickening crack and didn't get back up. Two more came at her together, coordinating their attack. She moved faster than thought, faster than any wolf should be able to move. Her fist caught one in the chest, and she felt ribs crack under her knuckles. He flew backward, crashing through a shelf that collapsed in a shower of papers and broken wood. The other swung at her head with everything he had. She ducked under the blade and drove her palm into his stomach. He collapsed, gasping, unable to breathe. Impossible, Torin breathed, his ancient face going pale. You haven't even fully awakened yet. Your power shouldn't be this strong. This can't be, isn't what? Fair? Lyra stalked toward him, power crackling around her like visible electricity. Papers burst into flame where they touched her aura. You want to talk about fair? You murdered my mother's entire bloodline. You've been killing innocents for decades, people who never hurt anyone, who didn't even know what they were. You tried to destroy me before I even knew I had power, and now you're surprised that I'm fighting back? I was protecting us from tyranny. You were protecting yourself. She grabbed him by the throat and lifted him off his feet with one hand. The ancient wolf weighed nothing, like lifting a child. You were afraid. You're still afraid. I can smell it on you, rank and bitter. You're terrified of what I represent, terrified that the old ways might return and you'll lose everything you've built on blood and lies. Lyra, Kale's voice cut through her rage, urgent and worried. Don't! If you kill him like this, you become exactly what they fear. You prove him right. She wanted to. The power sang in her veins, begging to be unleashed fully. It would be so easy to crush Torin's windpipe, to end him and everything he represented, to make him pay for every name in those ledgers. But Kyle was right. If she killed him now, she'd be proving every horrible thing they believed about the first queens. She'd be the monster they feared. She threw Torin to the ground instead. He landed hard, his staff clattering across the stone floor, coughing and wheezing. You're going to stand trial, she said, her voice still resonating with power. You're going to answer for every name in those ledgers, every Omega you murdered, every debt you manipulated, every life you destroyed, all of it. The council will never convict me, Torin gasped, clutching his throat. I have too much influence, too many secrets. They're all afraid of what I know about them. The council doesn't have a choice anymore. She looked at the remaining guards, who were backing away slowly toward the stairs, their weapons lowering. Smart. They were learning. Spread the word. Tell everyone what you saw here tonight. Tell them the old blood is returned. Tell them the first queens aren't just legends or cautionary tales. Tell them one of us survived. And tell them we're done hiding. One of the guards turned and ran, his boots pounding up the stairs. Then another. Within seconds, only two remained, and they looked ready to bolt. Kael stared at her, his expression caught between awe and fear. Lyra, what are you? I don't know yet. She looked at her hands, still glowing faintly with golden light that pulsed beneath her skin like molten metal in her veins. But I'm going to find out. Footsteps thundered overhead. Shouts echoed through the building. The alarm had been raised. More guards were coming, probably all of them. We need to leave, Kael said urgently, grabbing the journal with Torin's records. Now, before the whole guard force arrives. We can't fight an army, not even with your power. We can't just leave him here. He'll lie. He'll twist what happened. Then we take him with us, use him as leverage until the wall exploded inward, not from the guards rushing to respond, from something else entirely. A woman stepped through the rubble and dust like she was walking through a doorway, tall, impossibly tall, with silver hair that flowed past her waist and eyes like molten gold that seemed to glow with their own light. She wore armor that looked ancient, ornate, covered in the same symbols that decorated the catacomb walls. Power radiated from her in waves so intense that even the guards who'd stayed fell to their knees, unable to stand in her presence. The woman from Lyra's dreams. But solid now, real, standing in the archive like she'd simply walked out of legend and into reality. Hello, daughter of my line, she said, her voice echoing with ancient power that made the very stones resonate. I've been waiting centuries for you to awaken. Now, the real work begins. Lyra stared at the impossible figure, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. You're dead. You're supposed to be dead. The legends say, death is negotiable when you're a queen of the old line. The woman smiled, fierce and terrible and beautiful all at once. My name is Celine. I was the last of the first queens to fall, the final one they murdered before they thought they'd won, and I've been trapped between worlds ever since, anchored to the veil between life and death, waiting for my bloodline to produce someone strong enough to call me back to the living world. That's impossible. So is walking through fire unharmed. So is glowing with the light of the ancients. So is defeating trained guards with power you've only just discovered. So is everything you've done in the past week, child. Celine extended her hand, and the gesture was simultaneously an invitation and a command. Come with me. I'll teach you what you are, what you can become. The power inside you right now is only a fraction, a tiny, flickering candle compared to the inferno you'll wield when you're fully awakened and trained. Lyra, don't, Kael warned, his sword still raised even though it was obviously useless against whatever Celine was. We don't know what she is. She could be a trick, an illusion, a trap. She's family. Lyra could feel it, the blood connection singing between them like a plucked string, a recognition that went deeper than thought or reason. She's what I'll become if I survive long enough to learn, if I'm strong enough. More footsteps thundered overhead, getting closer. The entire guard force was mobilizing, converging on their location. They had maybe a minute before they were surrounded with no way out. Celine's smile widened, showing teeth. Choose quickly, daughter. Stay here and fight an army you're not ready to face. Powerful as you're becoming, you'll still fall to sheer numbers. Or come with me and learn how to burn them all to ash when you return strong enough to reshape this entire territory. It wasn't really a choice. Not when Finn was depending on her. Not when the truth about what she was still felt like a half-formed dream. Not when power beyond imagining was being offered. Lyra looked at Kael, memorizing his face. Find Finn. Keep him safe like you promised. If you break your word, if anything happens to him, I will come back and there won't be anything left of you or this territory to bury. Lyra, promise me. Her voice cracked with desperation and fear and determination. Swear it on your life. His jaw worked, emotions flickering across his face too fast to name. Then, I promise. On my life and my crown and everything I am. I'll protect him like he was my own blood. Nothing will touch him." She nodded once, sharp and final, then turned to Celine and took the offered hand. The moment their skin touched, the world exploded into golden light so bright it was blinding. When the guards finally burst into the archive, swords drawn and ready for battle, they found only Kael standing among the rubble, holding Torin's journal in one hand and his sword in the other. Scorch marks were burned into the stone walls in patterns that looked like wings. The air still crackled with residual energy that made their hair stand on end, and Lyra was gone. The golden light faded slowly, like someone was turning down a lamp. When Lyra's vision cleared, she was no longer in the archive beneath the council building. She stood in a vast hall carved from white stone that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Massive pillars reached toward a ceiling so high it disappeared into mist. The air here felt different, thicker, charged with energy that made her skin tingle. Through arched windows, she could see nothing but swirling golden fog. "Where are we?" Her voice echoed strangely in the emptiness. "Between," Celine said, releasing her hand. The ancient queen moved across the hall with fluid grace, her armor making no sound. Not the living world, not the realm of the dead, a place that exists in the cracks between realities. The first queens built it millennia ago as a refuge, a training ground. After they killed us, I retreated here, the only one who managed to escape before the final blow landed. I've been trapped here ever since, unable to fully return without an anchor in the living world. An anchor. Lyra turned in a slow circle, trying to process everything. The hall seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at it, like reality here was optional. "You mean me?" "I mean your blood. Your awakening power created a resonance I could follow, a thread connecting our world to this one." Celine stopped before a massive wall covered in carved symbols, the same ones from the catacombs, but here they glowed faintly. "The stronger you become, the more solid my connection to reality. Eventually, if you reach your full potential, I can return permanently. We both can." "We?" Celine touched the wall, and it rippled like water. Images appeared in the stone, faces of women with silver hair and golden eyes, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. The other queens who escaped here before they fell. They're sleeping, conserving their essence, waiting for the day our bloodline produces someone powerful enough to bring us all back. The weight of those words settled on Lyra like a physical thing. "You want me to resurrect an entire race of ancient rulers. I want you to reclaim what was stolen. From you? From me. From all of us." Celine's golden eyes burned with intensity. "They murdered us because they feared our power. They scattered our descendants and forbade them from knowing what they were. They built a system designed to keep anyone with our blood weak, subservient, disposable. For 1,000 years, they've gotten away with it. And you want revenge. I want justice. There's a difference." Celine's expression softened slightly. "But first, I want you to survive. And to do that, you need training. Your power is awakening, but it's wild, uncontrolled. You could burn yourself out if you're not careful, or worse, hurt someone you care about." Finn's face flashed in Lyra's mind. The thought of accidentally hurting him with powers she couldn't control made her stomach turn. "How long will training take?" she asked. "As long as it needs to. Time moves differently here. A day in this place could be a week in your world, or an hour. It depends on how quickly you learn." Lyra thought of Kael's promise to protect Finn, thought of the mob that had chased her, the guards who'd tried to kill her, Elder Torin's hatred. "Then we start now. I don't have time to waste." Celine smiled, fierce and approving. "Good. I was hoping you'd say that." The training was brutal. Celine didn't believe in starting slow or building up gradually. She threw Lyra into the deep end and expected her to swim or drown. "Power responds to will," Celine said, standing in the center of the hall while Lyra knelt on the floor, sweating and shaking. "Not emotion, not desire, will. The absolute certainty that reality will bend because you demand it. Show me fire." Lyra focused, reaching for that warmth in her chest. It was there, always there now, pulsing like a second heart. She thought about fire, imagined flames dancing in her palm. Nothing happened. "You're asking," Celine said. "Don't ask. Command." "I don't know how it—" "Yes, you do. You commanded fire to move around you when you walked into that burning house. You didn't ask it politely to step aside. You told it to obey, and it did. Do it again. Lyra gritted her teeth and tried again. This time she didn't imagine or wish. She demanded. Fire would appear because she willed it into existence. A small flame flickered to life in her palm. It guttered and died immediately, but for a moment it had been there. Again, Celine commanded, bigger this time, and make it last. They worked for hours, or days. Time had no meaning in this place, and Lyra quickly stopped trying to track it. She learned to summon fire and sustain it, to shape it into different forms, to control its intensity. She learned that the power came from somewhere deep inside her, from a well that seemed bottomless if she knew how to access it. The first queens didn't just throw power around randomly, Celine explained during one of their brief rest periods. We shaped reality with precision, a scalpel, not a hammer. Again. Lyra created fire, extinguished it, created it again. Her control improved incrementally. The flames stopped flickering and dying. They burned steady and bright, responding to her will like an extension of her body. Good. Now move it without moving your hands. That took longer to learn. The fire wanted to follow her physical gestures, drawn to the movement of her body. Teaching it to move independently required a different kind of focus. You're thinking of it as separate from yourself, Celine observed. It's not. The fire is you. Your will made manifest. It moves when you move, yes, but also when you think. Try again. Lyra breathed deep and tried to feel the fire as part of herself. Not something she was controlling, but something she was. The flame in her hand pulsed, responding to her heartbeat. There. She thought left, and the fire drifted left, hovering in the air without any physical support. Excellent. Now divide it. One flame became 2, then 4, then 8, spinning in a circle around her head like a crown of light. Celine actually smiled. You're learning faster than I did. The blood is strong in you, stronger than any descendant I've sensed in centuries. The praise warmed something in Lyra that had nothing to do with fire, but Celine didn't let her rest on that success. Fire is just the beginning. The first queens commanded all elements. Show me earth. That was harder. Fire was passion and will and energy. It matched Lyra's anger, her drive to survive. Earth was different, solid, stubborn, unyielding. Don't fight its nature, Celine advised. Earth doesn't bend easily, but it's patient, strong. Learn from it. Lyra pressed her palms against the stone floor and reached deep, searching for that same certainty she'd found with fire. The stone resisted at first, ancient and set in its ways. But gradually, slowly, she felt it respond. A small section of floor rippled like water, then rose in a pillar. Good. Again. Make it bigger. They worked until Lyra could shape stone like clay, raising walls and pillars and platforms with nothing but thought. It was exhausting in a different way than fire. Fire burned hot and fast, but earth required sustained pressure, constant will. Water came next, and it was like trying to hold smoke. Fluid, changing, impossible to pin down. Stop trying to control it, Celine said, exasperated after Lyra failed for the 10th time to maintain a sphere of water in the air. Water doesn't want to be controlled. It wants to flow. Work with it, not against it. That makes no sense, doesn't it? Think about your life. How many times did trying to control everything make things worse? How many times would going with the flow have served you better? Lyra thought about the rejection, about trying to hold herself together when everything was falling apart. Maybe Celine had a point. She tried again, this time not commanding, but inviting. The water responded, flowing into the shape she suggested rather than the shape she demanded. A sphere formed and held, spinning gently in the air between her hands. There. Now you're learning. Air was the hardest of all. Invisible, everywhere and nowhere, impossible to grasp. You're breathing it right now, Celine pointed out. It's inside you, it's part of you, the most intimate element, and you barely notice it exists. Lyra focused on her breathing, feeling air fill her lungs and leave them. In and out, constant, essential. Now move it. A breeze stirred in the hall, growing stronger as Lyra's confidence grew. Papers that didn't exist in this place would have been scattered. Her hair whipped around her face. Good, now make it deadly. The breeze became a gale, then a whirlwind. Lyra stood at its center, untouched, while wind howled around her in a vortex that could have torn flesh from bone. Excellent. You're ready for combat training. That was somehow even more brutal than element training. Celine didn't hold back. She attacked with fire and stone and razor-sharp winds, forcing Lyra to defend herself or get hurt. And Lyra did get hurt. Burns, cuts, bruises. But she also learned fast, driven by pain and necessity. In a real fight, your enemies won't give you time to think, Celine said, sending a lance of fire straight at Lyra's head. Lyra barely managed to deflect it with a wall of stone. You need to react on instinct. Faster. They fought across the hall, power crackling between them. Lyra learned to combine elements. Stone reinforced with fire became molten projectiles. Water mixed with air created ice. She learned to read her opponent's movements, to anticipate attacks, to counter and strike back in the same motion. Good. You're thinking like a warrior now, not a victim. The word struck something deep. Lyra had spent her whole life as a victim, of circumstance, of poverty, of a system designed to crush her. But that wasn't who she was anymore. She pushed back against Celine's assault with everything she had, fire and stone and wind and water all at once. The ancient queen actually had to block, raising her own defenses. Yes! That's the spirit. Show me what you're made of. They clashed again and again, power shaking the hall. Lyra lost track of how long they fought. Hours? Days? It didn't matter. All that mattered was getting stronger, getting better, learning to survive. Finally, Celine called a halt. Enough! You've learned what you need to know. The rest will come with practice and experience. Lyra collapsed to her knees, exhausted beyond anything she'd ever felt. Every muscle screamed, her head pounded, but she felt different, stronger, more certain of herself. How long was I here? She asked. 3 days in this place. Maybe an hour in yours, if we're lucky. Relief flooded through her. Finn would be safe. Kyle wouldn't have had time to break his promise, even if he wanted to. There's one more thing you need to learn, Celine said, her expression turning serious. The most important thing. Come. She led Lyra to the wall of faces, the sleeping queens. They're waiting for you to bring them back. But that's not a decision you have to make today, or tomorrow, or even this year. First, you need to decide what kind of queen you want to be. What do you mean? The first queens ruled with absolute power. We were beloved by some, feared by all. We made decisions that affected millions, and we didn't answer to anyone. Celine's golden eyes fixed on Lyra. That kind of power corrupts if you're not careful. I've seen it happen. Queens who started with good intentions became tyrants because no one could stop them. Is that what you want to become? Lyra thought about Elder Torrin, about how his fear of tyranny had turned him into exactly what he claimed to fight against. No, I don't want to be a tyrant. I just want people to be safe, to have choices, to not live in fear of being crushed for something they can't control. Then you'll have to find a different path than the ones we walked before. The old ways failed. That's why they were able to overthrow us. We became so powerful that we stopped listening to our people. We forgot that power is worthless if those you rule hate you for it. So what do? You return to your world. You claim your place, and you show them that power doesn't have to mean tyranny. Celine placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder. You're strong enough now to protect yourself and those you love. The rest, ruling, changing the system, deciding what kind of future you want to build, that's up to you. Lyra looked at the wall of sleeping queens. Will I see you again? If you choose to bring us back, yes. If not, Celine shrugged. We've been sleeping for centuries. We can sleep longer. Your life is your own, daughter. Don't let anyone, including me, tell you what to do with it. The words were strangely comforting coming from an ancient queen. I'm ready to go back, Lyra said. Celine smiled. I know. One more thing before you go. When you return, you'll be different. Stronger, yes, but also marked. People will see what you are. Some will fear you. Others will try to use you. Trust carefully. I will. Good. Now go. Your brother is waiting, and so is your king, whether you want him or not. The golden light swallowed her again. When it cleared, Lyra stood in the catacombs exactly where she'd left from. But something was different. The air felt thinner. The darkness seemed less dark. She could see perfectly despite the lack of light, could hear water dripping 3 chambers away, could feel the living presence of rats in the walls. Her senses had sharpened beyond anything human or even normal wolf. And when she looked down at her hands, faint lines of gold traced beneath her skin like veins of light. They faded as she watched, sinking deeper, but they were there, permanent, marking what she'd become. "Lyra?" Finn's voice, small and frightened, came from the deep chamber where they'd hidden him. She ran. He was exactly where they'd left him, wrapped in Kael's cloak, surrounded by supplies. But he was awake and crying, tears streaming down his face. "Finn, what's wrong? Are you hurt?" He threw himself into her arms, sobbing. "You were gone so long. I thought you weren't coming back. I thought they killed you." "How long?" She held him tight, her heart breaking at his fear. "All night. The sun's coming up. I could see light through the cracks." All night. So time had moved faster here than in Celine's realm. She'd been gone 8 hours, maybe more. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm here now. I'm okay." She pulled back to look at him, checking for injuries. He seemed fine physically, just scared. "You feel different," Finn said, his eyes wide. "Warmer. And there's light under your skin. I can see it." "I know. I'm still me, though. I promise." "What happened? Where did you go?" How could she explain training with an ancient queen in a realm between worlds? "Somewhere safe. Someone taught me how to control my power so I don't accidentally hurt people, so I can protect you better." Finn studied her face with those two old eyes. "You look different too. Older, stronger." "I feel different, but I'm still your sister. That hasn't changed." He nodded slowly, accepting this like he'd accepted everything else in his short, hard life. "What do we do now?" Good question. They couldn't stay in the catacombs forever, but returning to the lower district meant facing the mob. And she had no idea what had happened in the hours she'd been gone. Whether Kael had kept his promise, whether Torin was in custody, whether the entire territory was hunting her. "We wait for Kael," she decided. "He knows where we are. If he kept his promise, he'll come." They didn't have to wait long. Footsteps echoed through the tunnels less than an hour later. Lyra tensed, ready to fight, but she recognized the pattern of the stride. Kael emerged from the passage, looking haggard. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His clothes were rumpled, but he was alive and alone. "You came back," he said, relief flooding his face. I didn't know if that thing took you somewhere you could return from." "I'm back. What happened after I left?" "Chaos." He ran a hand through his hair, making it stand up in different directions. "The guards saw you disappear in a flash of golden light. Half of them think you're a demon. The other half think you're blessed by the old spirits. Torin is screaming that you're dangerous and need to be eliminated. The council is split. Some want you dead, others want to study what you are. A few actually want to protect you." "And you?" "I spent the entire night arguing with the council, showing them Torin's journals, trying to convince them that he's been murdering people for decades. Some believed me. Most are too afraid of him to act." His jaw clenched with frustration. "But I got enough support to call for a formal trial. Torin will have to answer for at least some of what he's done." "That's something." "It's not enough. He has too many allies, too much dirt on too many people. Unless we can sway public opinion, he'll walk away from this with maybe a slap on the wrist." Kael looked at her intently. "We need you, Lyra. You're the proof that the old bloodlines exist. You're evidence that everything he's been doing was real. If you testify, they'll kill me the moment I show my face. Not if I protect you. Not if enough of the council stands with us." He stepped closer. "I know it's asking a lot. I know you don't owe me or this territory anything. But if we don't stop him now, he'll keep killing. And next time, it might be Finn he targets to get to you." The threat to Finn changed everything. Lyra looked at her brother, who was watching the conversation with wide, worried eyes, then back at Kael. "When is the trial?" "Tomorrow at noon. Public forum in the main square. Everyone will be there." "The same square where you rejected me." His expression flickered with guilt. "Yes." There was a certain poetry to that, returning to the place of her greatest humiliation as something completely different. "Fine. I'll testify, but on one condition." "Name it." "When this is over, when Torin is dealt with, you help me change the system. The debt manipulations, the work camps, the way Omegas are treated like they're disposable. All of it. Real change, not just empty promises." Kael met her eyes steadily. "I swear it. On my crown and my life. Then we have a deal. They spent the rest of that day planning. Kale explained the trial format, who would be there, what questions they'd ask. Lyra practiced her testimony, finding words for things she'd never spoken aloud. As evening fell, Kyle brought food, real food, not scraps or thin soup. Fresh bread, roasted meat, fruit that Finn stared at like he'd never seen an apple before. Eat, Kyle commanded gently. You'll need your strength tomorrow. Finn didn't need to be told twice. He ate with the single-minded focus of someone who'd known real hunger. While Finn ate, Kyle and Lyra sat in a different chamber, speaking quietly. I'm sorry, he said suddenly, for everything, for the rejection, for being too blind to see what Torin was doing, for not protecting you when I should have. You deserved better. Yes, I did. She didn't soften it or make it easier for him. You destroyed my life because it was convenient, because standing up for me was hard. I know, and I can't undo it, but I can try to do better going forward. He looked at her, and there was genuine remorse in his eyes. You're extraordinary, Lyra. You were always extraordinary. I was too foolish to see it. Don't. She held up a hand. Don't make it about my power or my bloodline. That's not why you should have valued me. You should have valued me because I was your mate, because I was a person, not because I might be secretly powerful. He absorbed that like a blow. You're right. I'm sorry. They sat in silence for a while. Finally, Lyra said, The bond is gone. You severed it. There's no going back from that. I know. But we can work together for Finn, for the others Torin is targeting, for changing this territory into something better. I'd like that. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation, but it was a start. The next morning, they prepared to face the trial. Kyle had brought clean clothes for Lyra, simple but well made, better than anything she'd owned in her life. She dressed carefully, braided her hair back, and looked at herself in the small mirror Kale provided. She looked different, the same face, but there was something in her eyes now, confidence, power, knowledge of what she was capable of. Ready? Kyle asked. No, but let's go anyway. They emerged from the catacombs into bright daylight. The sun hurt Lyra's enhanced eyes until she adjusted. The streets were emptier than usual. Everyone was heading to the square for the trial. As they walked, people saw them. Gasps spread like ripples in water. Some people ran. Others stared. A few actually bowed, though Lyra wasn't sure if it was from respect or fear. Is that her? The one who disappeared in golden light? I heard she's a demon. I heard she's a queen returned. Look at her eyes. They're glowing. Lyra kept her head high and kept walking. The square was packed even more densely than it had been for the rejection. Every wolf in the territory must have been there, along with people from neighboring regions who'd heard rumors and come to see for themselves. The council sat on the raised platform. Elder Torin was there too, his face twisted with fury and fear when he saw Lyra. Kyle led her to the center of the square, the same spot where she'd knelt broken and humiliated a month ago. This time, she stood tall. Elder Marcus, the most senior council member after Torin, rose to speak. We are gathered to address serious accusations against Elder Torin regarding systematic elimination of territorial citizens. The king has provided evidence. We will hear testimony. Lyra Vale, step forward. The crowd murmured as she moved to the testimony platform. State your name and rank for the record. Lyra Vale, former Omega. Current, she paused. What was she now? Current descendant of the first queens. The crowd exploded with noise, shouts, gasps, arguments breaking out immediately. Order! Marcus banged his staff. Silence, or this proceeding ends. They quieted, but the tension was palpable. Tell us what Elder Torin did to you. Lyra took a breath and began. She told them everything. The fabricated debt, the quarry, the systematic attempt to work her to death, the refusal of healers to treat Finn, the mob that had chased her, Torin's admission in the archive that he'd been hunting her bloodline. And can you prove these accusations? The king has the journals. The evidence is there. Torin stood abruptly. She's lying. She's a demon trying to turn you against your protectors. Everything I did was to keep you safe from the tyranny of the old queens. You murdered 600 people, Lyra's voice rang out, power making it carry to every corner of the square. 600 innocents who never hurt anyone. You didn't protect anyone. You protected yourself from competition. They would have enslaved us all. No. Lyra stepped down from the platform and walked toward him. The crowd parted, giving her space. You enslaved us. You built a system that crushes anyone who might threaten your power. You manipulated debts. You worked people to death. You decided who lives and dies based on nothing but your fear. She stopped in front of the platform, looking up at him. I'm not here to enslave anyone. I'm here to make sure no one else suffers what I suffered, what hundreds of others suffered, and I'm here to make sure you answer for what you've done. Torrin's face went purple with rage. You're an abomination. You should have died. But I didn't. I survived. I got stronger. And now I'm going to make sure the truth comes out. She turned to address the crowd. I know you're afraid. I know the legends say the first queens were tyrants. Maybe some of them were. Power corrupts. And they had more power than anyone. But I'm not interested in ruling you. I'm interested in changing a system that allows people like Torrin to murder with impunity. I'm interested in making sure no Omega has to watch their brother slowly starve because they can't afford medicine. I'm interested in justice. The crowd was silent now, listening. The evidence is real. The journals are real. The names of the dead are real. You can choose to believe Torrin's lies, or you can choose to demand better from your leaders. It's up to you. For a long moment, no one moved. Then someone in the crowd stepped forward. Nora, the beta woman from the quarry. I believe her, Nora said loudly. I've seen what the work camps do to people. I've seen debts appear out of nowhere. I've seen people disappear. It's all true. Another voice joined hers, then another. People from the lower district, workers who'd seen the system's cruelty firsthand. She saved my grandmother from the fire. The debt collectors came for my family too. Torrin needs to answer for this. The tide was turning. Elder Marcus looked at Torrin, then at the crowd, then at the evidence Kael had presented. Elder Torrin, you are hereby stripped of your position pending full investigation. Guards, take him into custody. Torrin tried to resist, but the guards, different ones than before, ones Kael had personally selected, took him firmly by the arms. This isn't over, he screamed as they led him away. She's dangerous. You'll all see. You'll all regret this. But his words fell on deaf ears. The crowd erupted in cheers and arguments and heated discussions. Change was coming, messy and uncertain and real. Kael appeared at Lyra's side. You did it. He'll stand trial for everything now. We did it, she corrected. This was both of us. He smiled, tentative and genuine. What happens now? Lyra looked out at the crowd, at the territory that had rejected her and was now looking at her with a mixture of fear and hope and curiosity. Now we rebuild, she said, together, all of us. It wasn't a perfect ending. Torrin would still have supporters. The trial would be long and ugly. Changing the system would take years, maybe decades. But for the first time since the rejection, Lyra felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. Hope was a fragile thing, Lyra discovered. It could shatter as quickly as it formed. 3 days after Torrin's arrest, the first attack came. Lyra was in the lower district helping distribute food, real food, not scraps, that Kael had authorized from the royal stores. Finn sat nearby, looking healthier than he had in months, his cheeks finally showing some color. Around them, Omegas and lower-ranked wolves lined up with a mixture of gratitude and lingering suspicion. Is it true what they're saying? An older woman asked as Lyra handed her a sack of grain. That you're one of the old queens. I'm descended from them. I'm not. The explosion cut her off. Fire erupted from a building 2 streets over, the blast so powerful it knocked people off their feet. Lyra instinctively threw herself over Finn, shielding him with her body as debris rained down, screaming, chaos, the acrid smell of smoke and burning flesh. Lyra scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding. Finn, stay down. What's happening? I don't know. Don't move. Don't. She ran toward the explosion, power already rising in her chest. The building was collapsing, flames pouring from every window. People were trapped inside. She could hear them screaming. Without thinking, she called the fire. It responded instantly, flowing toward her like it recognized its master. The flames parted, creating a path into the burning structure. Lyra ran inside, the heat intense but not painful, and found 5 people huddled in a back room, choking on smoke. Come on, move! She half carried, half dragged them out through the path she'd created. The building groaned, ready to collapse completely. They made it out with seconds to spare, the structure crashing down behind them in a shower of sparks and ash. The rescued wolves stared at her with wide eyes. One of them, a young man with burns on his arms, whispered, "You controlled the fire," just like the legend said. Before Lyra could respond, Kael appeared with a squad of guards. His face was grim. It was deliberate. Someone planted an accelerant. This was an attack. Who? Torrens supporters. We found a message chalked on the street. Death to the Demon Queen. They're trying to turn people against you by making you look dangerous. Lyra looked at the burning building, at the injured people being tended to, at the growing crowd watching her with fear and fascination in equal measure. It's working. Over the next week, 3 more attacks happened. A fire at the orphanage that Lyra barely stopped in time. A collapsed bridge that she had to hold up with earth and stone while people evacuated. Each time she saved lives, and each time the whispers grew louder. She's too powerful. What if she turns on us? Maybe Torren was right. The trial was scheduled for the end of the month. Until then, tensions in the territory climbed higher every day. Kael assigned guards to protect Lyra and Finn, but it felt like putting a bandage on a wound that needed stitches. "They're afraid of you," Nora said bluntly one evening. She'd become an unlikely ally, one of the few people who'd speak to Lyra honestly. Not because of what you've done, but because of what you could do. They see you stop fires and move Earth, and they think about what happens if you decide to use that power against them. I wouldn't. I know that. You know that. But they don't. And Torren's people are making sure they stay scared. Nora leaned against the wall of the small house Kael had arranged for them, much better than their old place, but still in the lower district. You need to give them something to believe in besides fear. Like what? Show them you're not just powerful. Show them you're one of them. The idea took root. 2 days later, Lyra announced she was reopening the old community hall in the lower district. It had been abandoned for years, too damaged to use, too expensive to repair. She spent an entire day there with volunteers from the district, using her power not to fight or defend, but to build. She shaped stone to repair the foundation, called water to clean decades of grime from the walls, used fire carefully, precisely to forge new metal supports. It was exhausting work, but different than the quarry had been. This was creation, not destruction. People came to watch. Then a few started helping, passing materials, offering suggestions. By evening, the hall was structurally sound for the first time in a generation. "It's not finished," Lyra told the crowd that had gathered. "But it's a start. This can be a place for everyone. For meetings, celebrations, shelter when needed. It belongs to all of us." An old man in the crowd stepped forward. "Why are you doing this? You're powerful enough to take whatever you want. Why help us?" "Because I am you," Lyra said simply. "A month ago, I was working in the quarry, starving, watching my brother get sicker every day. The only thing that's changed is I learned what I'm capable of. But I remember what it's like to be powerless. I remember what it's like when the system is designed to crush you, and I don't want anyone else to go through that." The old man studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right, I believe you. But you've got to understand, we've been burned before. Every time someone promises change, it ends the same way. The powerful stay powerful. The rest of us keep struggling. Then help me make it different this time." It wasn't a dramatic moment. There were no cheers or sudden shifts. But something changed in the way people looked at her. A little less fear, a little more curiosity. The attacks didn't stop, but they slowed. Torren's supporters were losing momentum as more people saw Lyra working alongside them rather than above them. The trial finally came on a cold morning in late autumn. The square was packed again, but the energy was different than before. Tense, yes, but also expectant. People wanted answers. They wanted justice. The council had grown since the last gathering. Kael had appointed new members, wolves from different districts, different ranks. Not just the old guard who'd held power for decades. Torren was brought out in chains. He looked smaller somehow, diminished without his authority, but his eyes still burned with hatred when they landed on Lyra. "We are here to determine the truth," Elder Marcus began. "Elder Torren stands accused of systematic murder, corruption, and abuse of power. The evidence has been reviewed. We will hear final testimony, then render judgment. The prosecution went first. Cale presented the journals, reading names and dates aloud. Each name was a hammer blow. The crowd grew quieter with each one, the weight of 600 deaths settling over them like ash. Then came witnesses. People who'd lost family members to mysterious work accidents. Omegas who'd survived the camps and could testify to the brutal conditions. A former guard who'd been ordered to make deaths look natural. The evidence was overwhelming. When it was Torrens' turn to defend himself, he stood with shaking hands but defiant eyes. "Everything I did to protect you," he said, his voice carrying across the square. "The first queens were tyrants. They wielded power without restraint, without mercy. They would have enslaved us all. I eliminated threats to preserve our freedom." "By murdering innocent people?" Kael's voice cut through. "By deciding who lives and dies based on bloodlines they didn't choose?" "Yes!" Torrens' composure cracked. "Because the alternative was worse. You don't understand what it was like when they ruled. The fear, the helplessness. I lived through the final days, watched them burn entire villages that displeased them. I swore I would never let that happen again, no matter the cost." "So you became exactly what you feared," Lyra said, standing. "You burned villages too, just more slowly. You killed people who never hurt anyone. You created a system built on fear and control. How are you different from the tyrants you claim to fight?" "I never claimed to be good," Torrens' voice broke. "I claimed to be necessary. Someone had to make the hard choices. Someone had to—" "Enough!" Elder Marcus banged his staff. "The council will deliberate." They didn't take long. When Marcus returned, his face was grave. "Elder Torren, you are found guilty of all charges. The evidence is irrefutable. You will be stripped of all rank and titles. Your property will be seized to provide restitution to the families of your victims, and you will be exiled beyond the borders at dawn." Exile. A death sentence, just slower. Torren laughed, bitter and broken. "You think you've won? You think this changes anything? She's still dangerous." He pointed at Lyra with a trembling finger. "Power like that always corrupts. Always. You'll see. Give her time, and she'll become exactly what her ancestors were. And when she does, you'll wish you'd listened to me." The guards dragged him away, still shouting warnings that grew fainter as he disappeared. The crowd was silent for a long moment. Then someone started clapping. Slowly at first, then others joined. Not everyone. There were still plenty who looked uncertain, afraid. But enough. Lyra didn't feel triumphant. She felt tired. Hollow. Justice was supposed to feel better than this. Kael found her afterward, away from the crowds. "You did it. He's gone. We did it, and he's not wrong, you know." "About what?" "Power corrupts. I can feel it sometimes, the temptation to just make people do what I want. It would be so easy." She looked at her hands, where gold still traced beneath her skin. "How do I make sure I don't become what he feared?" "You keep asking that question," Kael said. "The moment you stop worrying about it is the moment you're in danger. But I don't think you'll stop. I've seen you with the people in the lower district. You could demand their loyalty, but you're earning it instead. That's the difference." Maybe. Lyra wanted to believe that. The days after the trial were chaotic in a different way. Kael began implementing changes, restructuring the debt system, improving conditions in the work camps, appointing ombudsmen to investigate complaints. It was slow, messy work. There was resistance from wolves who'd benefited from the old system. But there was also momentum. People who'd been silent found their voices. Workers organized. The lower districts started electing their own representatives to bring concerns to the council. Lyra worked alongside them, not as a queen but as someone who understood what they needed because she'd lived it. She helped rebuild homes damaged in the attacks, used her power to improve infrastructure, clean water, better roads, reinforced buildings, practical things that made daily life easier. Finn got stronger every day. With regular food and access to real healers, the wasting sickness that had plagued him began to recede. He even started training with other children his age, learning basic skills, laughing in a way Lyra hadn't heard in years. Watching him play with other kids one afternoon, Lyra felt something tight in her chest finally loosen. "You did good," Nora said, appearing beside her. "He looks happy. He deserves to be. So do you." Lyra didn't know how to respond to that. 3 months after Torin's exile, Kael called a territory-wide assembly. Everyone gathered in the square again, but this time there was no trial, no judgment, just a conversation. "We've made progress," Kael began, standing without his crown or ceremonial armor. Just simple clothes. "The debt system has been reformed. Work conditions are improving. We've established oversight to prevent abuse of power. But there's more to do, and I can't do it alone. None of us can." He gestured to Lyra, who stood to the side with Finn. Lyra Vale could have demanded power. Her bloodline gives her that right according to the old laws. Her strength makes her nearly unstoppable, but instead she's chosen to work with us, not above us, to use her power to build rather than rule. Lyra stepped forward, her heart pounding. "I'm not here to replace one tyrant with another. I'm not interested in sitting on a throne making decisions for everyone, but I'm interested in making sure the system works for all of us, not just the powerful. So I have a proposal." She took a breath. "I want to establish a council of equals, representatives from every district, every rank, not appointed by the king or inherited through bloodlines, but chosen by the people they represent. They'll work with the king to make decisions, provide oversight, ensure no one person has absolute power, including me." The crowd murmured. Some looked confused, others intrigued. An alpha from the northern district stood. "And what's your role in this council? Whatever the people decide, I have power, that's not changing. But how I use it should be accountable to more than just my own judgment. I've seen what happens when powerful people answer to no one. I don't want to become that." "What if people choose you to lead?" someone called out. "Then I'll serve. But not as a queen with absolute authority. As one voice among many." She looked out at the faces watching her. "I know you're afraid. I know the legends say people like me can't be trusted with power. Maybe they're right. But I'm asking you to let me prove I'm different. Not through force, but through action. Judge me by what I do, not what I could do." The debate that followed lasted hours. Heated, messy, democratic. In the end, they voted to try it. A trial period, 6 months of the new council system. If it worked, they'd make it permanent. It wasn't perfect. There were arguments, disagreements, setbacks. Some of the old guard resisted. Some people still feared Lyra and what she represented. But it was better, tangibly, measurably better. 6 months later, the council system was made permanent. Lyra was elected as one of the representatives from the lower district, but with specific limitations on how she could use her power, restrictions she'd proposed herself. A year after the rejection, Lyra stood in the same square where Kael had thrown her away. But this time, she wasn't kneeling broken and humiliated. She was standing tall as the community hall she'd helped build was dedicated. People filled the square, not to witness a rejection or a trial, but to celebrate. There was music, food, children running between adults' legs. Finn was among them, healthy and laughing, racing with friends he'd made. Kael approached, looking different than he had a year ago. Less rigid, more human. "I never properly apologized for what I did to you in this square." "You've apologized multiple times. Words are cheap. I wanted you to know that I understand now what I took from you. The bond might be gone, but I robbed you of dignity, security, hope. I can't undo that, but I can make sure I never abuse power like that again." Lyra looked at him for a long moment. "You're trying. That counts for something. Is there any chance—" He hesitated. "Could we ever—" "No." She said it gently but firmly. "The bond is gone, Kael. And even if it wasn't, I'm not the same person you rejected. You're not the same person who rejected me. We've both changed too much. But we can work together. We already are." She gestured to the celebration around them. "This is us working together, building something better. That's enough." He nodded, acceptance and relief mixing on his face. It is enough. As the sun set, casting the square in golden light, Nora found Lyra at the edge of the crowd. "You did it, you know. Changed everything. We did it, all of us. Don't be modest. You could have seized power and no one could have stopped you. Instead, you gave it away, shared it. That takes more strength than any element manipulation." Lyra thought about Selene, waiting in the realm between worlds with all those sleeping queens. She hadn't brought them back. Hadn't tried to resurrect the old order. Maybe someday she would, if the world was ready. But not yet. "Power for its own sake is empty," she said. "I learned that the hard way. What matters is what you do with it. who you protect, what you build. Spoken like a true queen. I'm not a queen. Maybe, but you're something better. A person who had power and chose to stay human. Nora smiled. That's rarer than you think. Finn ran up, breathless and happy. Lyra, come on, they're starting the fire dancing. Fire dancing? Yeah, like you did when you stopped the fires. They turned it into a celebration. Lyra let her brother pull her into the crowd, where people were indeed dancing with controlled flames, weaving patterns of light through the air. Someone handed her a torch, and she joined in, shaping fire into spirals and flowers and abstract beauty. The crowd cheered, not with fear but with joy. Looking around at the faces illuminated by firelight, people who'd been strangers a year ago but were neighbors now, allies, friends, Lyra felt something she'd never expected to feel. Belonging. Not because of her power or her bloodline or what she could do for them, but because she'd chosen to be part of something larger than herself. Because she'd been broken and built herself back up stronger, not harder. The warmth in her chest pulsed steady and strong, not burning, not destructive, just there, a part of her, like her heartbeat or her breath. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, terrified, humiliated, desperate. Would that Lyra believe what she'd become? Probably not. But that was okay. Growth meant leaving parts of yourself behind. The trick was remembering where you came from even as you moved forward. Finn appeared at her side again, watching the dancing with wide eyes. Are you happy, Lyra? She looked down at her brother, healthy, safe, with a future stretching before him instead of just survival. Yeah, Finn, I am. Good. You deserve to be. Simple words from a child, but they hit harder than any speech or declaration. She deserved to be happy. After everything, the rejection, the suffering, the violence, the fear, she deserved peace. And maybe, just maybe, she'd found it. Not in power or revenge or proving herself to people who'd dismissed her, but in the quiet work of building something better, in protecting the people who couldn't protect themselves, in choosing every single day to be better than her worst moments. The fire danced higher, painting the square in gold and amber. Somewhere in the crowd, Kael was talking with council members, planning tomorrow's projects. Nora was arguing with someone about resource distribution. Children were laughing. Life was happening. Messy, imperfect, beautiful life. And Lyra was part of it. Not as a rejected Omega. Not as a vengeful queen. Not as a victim or a savior. Just as herself. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The music swelled. The fire danced. And in a square that had once held her greatest humiliation, Lyra celebrated with the people who'd become her family, not through blood or bonds or power, but through the simple, radical act of choosing each other. The stars came out one by one above them. Somewhere in the realm between worlds, Selene watched and smiled. The sleeping queens could wait. Their descendant was exactly where she needed to be, building the future. Not the one that had been taken from them, but the one they were creating together, different, better, theirs. And as the celebration continued into the night, Lyra danced with flames that answered to her will but no longer defined her, surrounded by people who saw her not as a threat or a weapon or a legend, but simply as Lyra. Someone who'd been broken and refused to stay that way. Someone who'd been given power and chose to share it. Someone who'd been rejected and found something better than acceptance. She'd found purpose. The fire burned bright. The future burned brighter. And Lyra, the rejected mate, who became something far greater than any queen, burned brightest of all. Not with rage or revenge, but with hope.